budget session for Williamsport City Council on Monday, November 26th. Please rise for invocation followed by pledge of allegiance. Lord, we enter into what in city government is sometimes one of the more difficult parts of the year, but also we're in the midst of one of the more joyous parts of the year for many people. Let's work together to help us to work together to find balance in all of what we do for a common and shared set of values and goals. Protect those who protect us, both at home and abroad. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We have one main budget item, or one main agenda item this evening, which is the review of half of our budget. And so, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you and your staff. Mr. Nichols.
Good evening.
How are you this evening?
Fine, thank you. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was very good. I'm still stuffed.
If you recall, I asked if anybody would, I got no invitations from anybody from council, just wanted to update you. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm so sorry. I really am. Are you going to be okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
The City of Williamsport in 2019 proposed budget. This is work session number 1, and as usual, I provide you with RVT's service highlights for the previous year, or 2018. I guess I should call them standard highlights now. That's okay. Anyway, just to give you a little update what happened this past year, which you might find interesting. I feel we had a very busy and productive year over the past several months. A really, I think, important thing that happened, I'm very proud of. The RVT staff received an Achievement of Excellence from the Federal Transit Administration for a perfect train compliance and audit review. I think RVT has a great staff, and I'm very proud of their accomplishments and able to work with the federal government, state government, in providing services that they are charged to do. Also, we had a total ridership of, and this is a fiscal year ending June 30th, of 1,292,728 passengers. Our senior citizen ridership did increase by about 4.5%. And our accessible features that we have on our buses are wheelchair ramps. The utilization of our accessible features increased by 20%, so that, I think, is an important statistic. We received 9 additional CNG vehicles. We now have a total of 19. We'll be coming before you early next year to award a contract for 4 more CNG vehicles, and then 4 more in 2020, and that will complete our conversion. So we're happy to be able to finally make that project completed. We were recognized by DEP on Earth Day this year. They provided us with 2 AFIG grants, which helped to build our CNG facility, and so that was a nice event in April. Back in February of this year, we initiated our fixed route public transit service to Clinton County as part of a 3-year demonstration grant, and that continues to go well. We also completed our 7th year of managing Best Transit, which, as you know, is a 3-county transit system up in Bradford, Sutherland, and Tioga counties. And we're continuing to work with the Central PA Transportation Coalition to the 5 counties south of us who are very excited about possible opportunity of fixed route service in that area. So we continue to work with a lot of stakeholders to see just where that may go. RVT and the Hiawatha Paddle Riverboat continue to use e-commerce through Fair Harbor, and that is really a tremendous a way to sell our services for both the Hiawatha and RVT. We had a record year in the Hiawatha last year. This year was a little challenging with all the rain and more rain. We actually lost a couple of weeks of service because of the flooding in Susquehanna State Park, but we still had a pretty decent year of almost 24,000 passengers that took advantage of the Hiawatha. And we continue to work with the city on various city projects, capital projects, such as Bowman Field and East 3rd Street, which is going to be coming to fruition next year. We are soon going out to bid for that project. That would be a portion of East 3rd Street between State and Basin Street, and then Basin and Franklin Streets, obviously in partnership with the college. So that's going to be an exciting project for the city next year. If you look at page 7, you'll see that our utilization of CNG now has quadrupled since 2016, and because of the price difference, it provides an amazing opportunity to save dollars, and right now, if we were still a diesel-fueled system, we'd be paying about $200,000 more in fuel costs. So it's a tremendous savings and obviously an environmental plus in what we're doing. The Trade and Transit Center, it's been 2 years now, and over 200 events have been held in the event center, and we're still continuing the sports walk, expanding that. And the next announcement in terms of who's honored for the sports walk will be at the Crosscutter Hot Stove event in January, so we look forward to that. And we just completed, we have a proposed strategic plan that we're finalizing right now, and so that'll lay out our future for the next several years. And last page just shows you a global view of RVT and its affiliate agencies and just all the different things we're involved in, and we're very privileged and excited that we're continuing to be able to serve the community in many different ways. So with that said, I guess I will go to the utility fund, if that's okay.
Mr. Nichols,
Yeah.
the addition of the 5 lower counties, what's the projected timeline on that, or is this just in discussion phase?
Well, it's been a discussion for several years now.
Okay.
They do have shared ride down in those counties. There's becoming a more demand for medical transportation and the desire to have fixed route services, maybe serve as a feeder route into major trip generators. We were very fortunate to get a demonstration grant for Clinton County. The group that we have in place down there, which was first started by the state, is now looking to see if there is a possibility of another demonstration grant. But there's a great need down there for fixed route transportation, and it'd be a great opportunity if it comes about. But there's also a link between Lycoming County and down Lewisburg and Geisinger and Columbia Union, Northumberland counties. So again, it's a work in progress, and we're responding to what they feel are the needs, and we feel that and all the studies have been done now, several of them by the state. I think there'll be an opportunity at some point, but right now we're just trying to move it along.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Going to the utility fund under River Valley Transit, starting on the first page, you'll see that the projected revenues are indicated by line, and starting with the first line item, which is bus fares, we're budgeting $820,000 based on a current service plan and projected ridership for next year. Advertising $25,000, primarily sale of the bus billboards. Senior citizen fares, again, it's a zero amount because that, through Act 44, was rolled into our allocation from the state. Charters, $10,000, other income, $7,857. The federal, $1,900,000 is based on our current level of operation and performance factors and ridership. From the state, $4,348,063. Operating subsidy municipal, $386,580, and that's the city of Williamsport and the 8 different municipalities that we provide service. I call them the core part of our system. The local share to the Williamsport and the various municipalities hasn't changed for over 20 years because we've been able to expand, and with that, able to get new local share participants. And a lot of the new ones are under operating subsidy other, such as UPMC, the colleges. Then there is interest income of $2,500, program income of $350,000, which is from income derived from Church Street, from parking and tenants. And then we have a transfer of $225,000, which we do each year to fund part of the debt service that is in place for our completed projects. So total income proposed for 2019 is $7,675,000, and then following pages show 3 categories of expenses: administration, vehicle operations, and maintenance.
Any comments or questions on this first page? Ms. Mealy?
Just one small one. The program income transfer to cover debt service, why is it increasing this year?
Well, there was, I can't remember when, the principal and interest varies by year. We did redo if you remember, refinance our bond obligations. And I think that when I looked at the total budget, that was a balancing number that, we needed for our debt service budget.
Okay, so this is not related to debt service specific to the Church Street garage, but related to all of RVT's debt service?
Yes.
Okay, and that increased this year because of the refinancing?
Well, it's just to reallocate how we propose to allocate funds for debt service, and we're just able to take more out of Church Street for debt service, which is what we originally intended to do, is take it out of program income, and going forward, that'll be about the amount that we propose now that we pretty have a stable debt service number going forward.
Got it.
Is that it?
Move on, or?
All right. Yes. Next page, please.
It's administration under Bureau of Transportation, Personnel Services, administrative salaries, $319,800, which is for 6 full-time positions. Then the benefit line items of life insurance, health insurance, which does show a 7% increase this year for RVT in the city. FICA, pensions, physical exams, $2,500, and unemployment compensation, $5,000, for a total personal services of $1,653,050. Under purchase of services, telephone, $28,000, travel, $4,500, light and power is $90,000, and if you remember, that went up because part of the expense of C&G is compressing natural gas at the compression station, so which uses electricity, so that's part of the cost of that application. Service contracts, $125,000. Primarily, our contract was STEP to provide paratransit, complimentary paratransit service as required by federal government. Hearings and litigation, $3,000. Planning, $450,000, which is a transfer to our planning budget, which you'll see. Subscription and dues, $3,500. Administrative services, a transfer to the city of $75,000. Auditing services, $37,000, which helps fund the city's single audit, as well as our 630 financial reports that we're required to produce each year. Supplies and materials under administration, general office supplies, $40,000. Insurance building, $3,500. Heat, $10,000. And that, again, has come down significantly, less than half of what it used to be, because with the garage project we did a few years ago, we now heat our garage with used oil, as well as we have geothermal wells. So that's paid dividends. Facility maintenance, $65,000. Things of janitorial services, facility repairs, contingency, $237,900, which is higher than a usual contingency, but it's what we place as a placeholder in case we have opportunities for expanded services. So about half of that we set aside for potentially expanded services or changes to our service plan, as well as any contingency needs that occur during the year, for a total of $2,825,450.
All right, comments or questions then on page 2 and 3? Mr. Slaughter.
The $450,000 that transfers to planning, what is that primarily used for?
You'll see a separate budget for planning, and you'll see a separate salary detail for planning. and what we need to do, because we have so many affiliate agencies, we have a lot of contract services. Contract services falls under the planning budget, and so we have to separate that for audit purposes, and when we charge fees for that, it goes to the planning budget. And that's a balancing number.
And the contingency, is that for service to Clinton County as well? Or
No, there's a separate line you'll see for that demonstration grant of $300,000. This is just amount, again, we set aside in case, again, that's for just adding a little bit of service can be expensive, so we need to have a placeholder just in case we do. Every spring is when we make a decision whether we need to alter anything, adding a little service or what have you, and so that's how we have an amount ready or a placeholder in case we need those extra dollars.
For example, what service would we add, for example?
Down below, possibly, we add service to a Newberry-Montoursville route. We add service to Jersey Shore. We add, there's a lot of potential. We operate 900,000 miles a year, so if there's an opportunity arises for a new development, for example, that we can provide service, then again, there'd be dollars available to do that.
So we absorb that cost. Just a quick one, back on page 1, I had a question. The operating subsidy other, would that include BEST and the things we do what all is included in the other?
The local municipalities like Loyalsock, Montoursville, Southside, Du Bois Town, Old Lycoming Township, what have you. The other are partnerships that we have, for example, Lycoming Mall, Lycoming Crossings, UPMC, Penn College, Lycoming College, Weiss Markets, Walmart Plaza. That's what comprises that, other than municipalities.
So is BEST reflected in here anywhere?
No, it is not. That's a separate, the BEST transportation budget is separate, and that's approved by the BEST Authority Board. You'll see that the only relationship in this budget to the BEST budget is where you'll see, again, contract services are in the planning budget, and you'll see that there is revenue derived from contract services, and Best Transit pays us, under a contract service arrangement between Best and PennDOT. Those dollars then help fund those planning positions that participate in managing Best Transit. And I can explain that. I'll go over that when we get to the planning
okay.
budget, if that helps.
Yeah.
I mean, I can try to clarify that if I can.
Yep.
Other comments or questions then on pages 2 and 3? Mr. Novella?
On page 2, Bill, under service contracts, 2018, 95,000, now we're looking at 125. That's a fairly substantial jump. Can you give us some background on that?
Yes, it is, and it's something I'm trying to work through with the state. Under shared ride, which STEP participates in, as well as Best Transit, as we participate in up north, shared ride has a lot of funding sources, from lottery to PWD to medical assistance to whatever. The state evidently is now making a case where under PWD, the funding source of last resort was, until a couple months ago, was RVT. Now they have switched that where RVT now takes precedent over PWD, which is funds those with disabilities that need to go to work and things like that. So previously, STEP would charge PWD for those trips, and now they're charging us for those trips. So that is sort of a substantial hit, and it's only for those trips that are within 3/4 of a mile of a bus route. And whether it's a budgetary issue with the state, I'm not sure, but they're pressing shared ride systems to charge transit systems under the complementary paratransit service provision before they would charge off to PWD, or persons with this. PWD stands with persons with disabilities. So, our monthly bill skyrocketed all of a sudden a couple months ago, so that's why I had to make that adjustment. Again, I'm trying to make sure that those trips that are charged off all of a sudden do meet the criteria of our need to fund them. Again, that being they are certified under the program properly, and secondly, that they are truly within 3/4 of a bus route, and that the trip needed is during our service hours and not before or after. So that's the reason, unfortunately.
And I'm assuming that this number is not a number that you can necessarily zero down. This is your best proposed.
I'm sorry?
I'm assuming that this is a number that's difficult to zero down on and come up with an absolute number. So this is your best proposed.
Yes, right now.
Person here.
Yeah, we're still working through, staff's working through a couple months of trips that we were billed to see, making sure that they are, again, a certified. You know, we certify ADA, under ADA. It's all started with ADA in 1991, and if you have a fixed route system, you have to have a shared ride service available to any persons with disabilities that cannot use the fixed route. And again, the pecking order for individuals that need to make those paratransit trips, there's medical assistance lottery, like I said, number of programs, and then they go down, you know, to see which program will fund their particular trip. As I said, it used to be PWD felt was above RVT. That's now switched, so there's a lot of trips involved there, and we reimburse them. The client is responsible for twice our base fare, which is $4, and then we have to pay the rest, which is $24. So it's, you know, expensive program.
Other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to page 4.
Under operations, on page 4, supervision, our transit operations supervisors, $336,200. Drivers' wages, $1,911,625. I should state that all positions, both salaried and the bargaining unit, are shown to be given a 2.5% increase. Over this year, workers' comp, $145,000 for a total of $2,392,825 under personal services. Purchase of service, training, and safety, which is for all employees, it is $55,000. Transfer trade and transit center operation budget, $650,000. Then under supplies and materials, bus fuel, $400,000. Oil and grease, $10,000. Shop equipment, $5,000. Uniforms, $15,000. Printing copies for our ride guide and other printed materials, $25,000. Advertising, $150,000. Insurance, $140,000. And insurance drivers, $200 for a total of $3,843,025.
Questions? Ms. Mealy?
Sorry, actually, just a quick question about the salary detail. Explain to me the way that, the curious things that are happening salary-wise at RVT this year. There isn't really a good time to ask that, so I figured that this part of the under the Bureau of Transportation budget.
Are you looking at the salary detail?
Yeah,
Okay.
but page 6 of the salary detail, sorry, under the Bureau of Transportation. Salaries, I'm a little, the salary of the assistant general manager is dropping precipitously, which it was kind of him or her to allow you to do. But then there's, and an increase in the number of drivers is no big thing, but I was just trying to figure out, seems to be a substantial increase in the salary of the transportation supervisors individually. I was just trying to understand what was going on there. The overall budget wasn't dramatically different, but some of the salaries had varied kind of substantially.
Yeah, it's only about a 2.5% increase, but there's a lot of reorganizations going on. For example, the assistant general manager is retiring,
Okay,
and he's in the drop.
okay.
So my assistant general manager of 39 years will be dropping off.
We're worried, Bill.
Everybody's leaving. So anyway, let's see what else.
Quick follow-up on that. And so the intention is to not have an assistant general manager subsequently?
We are going to continue to reorganize. I'm not I may put more emphasis on supervision and not hire an assistant general manager to replace him, yes. That's what that indicates, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
I might say that the numbers, if you look at last year's salary detail, it was 34 and a half. I'm not sure how I made it 33, that was a mistake on my part. But if you look at last year, it was 34. Because if you look over
What was
drivers,
34?
34. Last year was 34 and 1 part-time. The only difference from last year, this year is 34 and 2 part-time.
Okay.
So, yeah, which,
I
again,
mean,
if you look in the salary detail from last year, you'll see that.
Okay,
That was a mistake on my part.
got it.
Because there's only 2.5% increase on the salary line item for the
Yeah.
drivers.
That was also what I thought.
Same way, I must have picked up a number of mechanics too. That actually, what last year was 8.5.
Okay,
So again, only half a position.
okay.
And it's only about 2.5%. The shared ride call center is the big, it's really the big difference. One of the big things that we accomplished this year was with the opening of Trade and Transit and a new call center put in Trade and Transit 2, all the reservations, all dispatch now comes out of Williamsport at the Trade and Transit facility in the call center. So a year ago, we did not have a call center. We now have a call center. And so that's one of the things that was required by PennDOT. They implemented what is called EcoLane, which is a shared ride reservation process. Every shared ride system in the Commonwealth had to implement that, which we did. And we had to centralize. I think some of you maybe went through the call center just to see. It's quite an amazing software program where we can see where every vehicle is in a 4-county area. And like I said, every call, it was very seamless, where calls that used to go in up north to 2 locations now come into the call center. All dispatching comes out of the call center. Through IT of today and radios and whatever, it's pretty amazing. We now have 11 lines that come into the call center, which certain parts of the day are extremely busy. So, if you haven't seen it, it's pretty amazing system. So that's what helped fund Trade and Transit, that provided funds with demonstration grant. So it's all, again, the push for regionalization. I think those are the main differences. Retirements and restructuring because of everything we're doing.
Okay, there are some weird discrepancies between last year's salary detail and this year's. The 34.5 on the drivers is accurate, but you are only showing 7.5 mechanics versus 9 this year. Not 7 to 9, but 7.5 to 9. I'm also showing an extra employee in the Trade and Transit Center / museum this year over last year, which isn't showing on this year's salary detail, but we budgeted for
I'm sorry,
last year.
I didn't catch where you...
I'm showing 4 employees at the Trade and Transit Center Museum budgeted for last year, according to last year's salary detail, but 5 budgeted for this year.
We added a new, and he's worked down, you may have seen him down here at City Hall, Jordan Philman. We added a new HVAC mechanical
So you're
employee.
saying he was added at some point in 2018 unexpectedly? Is that?
I'm not sure the exact date.
Okay. And it sounds like the shared ride call center was also added at some point. I mean,
Correct.
not unexpectedly, but it wasn't foreseen in last year's budget, but it
No.
happened sometime in this year.
No, I tried to make it apples to apples to show what.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, it wasn't foreseen at the time that we okayed the 2018 budget, unless I grabbed, what the heck am I talking about? Maybe I grabbed the wrong budget.
The salary detail just gives
Yeah, I know, I am, never mind, okay, no, that's gonna do me a fat lot of good.
You're right, though, it's not in there.
Yeah, okay, well, all
salary-
right, well, Derek, you might have grabbed the right one, so you can help me out if it is there or not.
No, it's not.
Okay, yeah, so that just, it kind of appeared mid-year, got it. But moving forward, it's gonna stay. All right, I'll stop cross-comparison then, unless I look at Jonathan's budget. But,
You know, what's
Okay. And then-
what's amazing is, you know, if we hired 1 or 2 people a year, it was a lot. Hired 17 people because of all the changes, retirements. Everybody I hired when I first started are now retiring, so, which gives you an opportunity to reorganize and new challenges and things like that. So it's trying to keep it updated.
So to follow up on the salary increases for the transportation supervisors, what's the plan there moving forward?
Yes. Yes.
Wha-
Because, again, as we become more, as we integrate with and taking over certain responsibilities that Best did, for example, finance, we do all the finance, training and things like that. As we move into training, do the training for, you know, Best Transit,
Okay.
you know, that's going to create opportunities for us to, again, consolidate and save money that way. So that's where we're leading, is once retirement happens, is that we might move into the next coordination activity, which would be training.
Got it.
Again, this just gives you a nice snapshot. There's so much, you know, the controlling budget obviously is the budget. This just gives you an idea of, you know, how we allocate our resources right now. I mean, but
No, I
it's going-
understand.
It's going to
I
change.
guess
because-
I'm just trying to understand. If Best's budget is done separately, then we're looking at a 1-year increase in the transportation supervisor salaries that will then be absorbed by the Best budget
Yes,
next year?
Correct.
When that training has taken place?
That's correct.
Okay. So these salaries, as far as RVT city portion is concerned, will return to something in the $230,000 level next year, because Best will begin compensating, those employees will be
now we're going to
partly
show this as an
compensated out of
expense in
the
our budget, because this is one of the, like our finance, like you'll see in the planning budget, a line item where it shows income derived from contract services. So
Got it.
we're going to continue to show the expense in this case.
Okay, so the
We don't
expense will show
show-
on RVT, but will be transferred from
Yeah,
Best.
the only expenses we show in terms of our contract services are management personnel,
Mm-hmm.
drivers, mechanics, and things like that, are Best employees,
Mm-hmm.
not RVT employees.
Got it. Okay, all right,
I
understood.
know it's like convoluted at best.
Just to
Bill,
clarify.
you wouldn't have it any other way. I said you wouldn't have it any other way.
No, geez. I wish so.
Anyway, what were you saying, Jonathan? Sorry.
He said convoluted at best, and I thought he was
I
talking
bet,
about.
I
at
missed
best.
that one. That was
Yeah.
pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that concludes my questions. I was just sort of wondering what's going on there. We'll be sorry to see your assistant go. Okay.
Other comments or questions on pages, I think we're still on 3 and 4? Mr. Slar?
So just going back to the salary detail for a little bit, because that is very full. So the follow-up with what Councilwoman Mealy was saying, the transportation supervisors will be doing work for Best. That's why the increase there on page 6. I mean,
We're
that's
gonna,
it. They're
the
getting,
intention is to add another supervisor. We moved the salary of the assistant general manager for full-time, for a full year, to supervision, instead of funding that position for a full year.
so they're all getting $13,593 raises.
What's that?
They're each getting over a $13,000 raise. Each transportation supervisor is getting over a $13,000 raise. That
They
just
are?
seems significant,
I'll
given if you do the math.
No,
yeah.
it's 2.5%. We're adding a fifth, at some point, we're going to be adding a fifth supervisor.
But that's not reflected right now.
Well, it is in the, it's in the budget, it is.
I think what Mr. Slutter's saying is it begins the year, it ends 2018 with 4 in that position, and the 2019 proposed salary detail shows 4 employees.
Well, it'll be 5 at some point. Once the assistant general manager retires, then we're going to add a supervisor.
And
I guarantee you they're not getting
think-
13%,
I'm
they're
assuming-
getting a 2.5% increase.
I'm assuming by the math that the assistant general manager plans to retire somewhere around the end of April.
Yes.
And yet you show a whole assistant general manager for the year.
Well, if you want to change, again,
And
if
you
you want to
show-
change it to a .67 and add the number, I mean, you can.
But I think that clarifies whether, how we should show it on paper is something probably should straighten out, but I think that clarifies your intention, at least to me, but I'm not sure if I was asking the same questions Mr. Slaughter was.
I mean, I was just going off what it shows
Yeah,
right
sure.
now. I mean, and it shows we're in a tight budget crunch, but they're getting a $13,000 raise. What if the assistant general manager doesn't retire? I mean, I think this should accurately reflect, is just,
He'll have to retire.
That's
because
not,
of the
this is
drop.
not a controlling number, this is just how,
Yeah,
and, right, so, I mean, but even the numbers, like Councilwoman Mealy said, from last year to this year are incorrect. I mean, 7, 8.5, you know, and then we added a call center mid-year, and then we added trade and transit mid-year. I mean, it's things that aren't even budgeted for last year that are now showing up in this year, and it's hard to follow. I mean, I just don't know where we pull these numbers from, to be quite honest. And then you look back at.
well, if you would certainly take the opportunity to come up, I'd be glad to explain it, because, you know, when you're running several operations, you're adding mid-year, you're dealing with grants. We deal on a fiscal year with the federal and state government, not a calendar year, so it's pretty tough to put the numbers into the right spot when you're trying to run 2 different fiscal years in a year. So it's very easy to, you know, we added a call center. That was not in place at the beginning of the year, so we didn't want to wait 12 months to add a call center. That wouldn't be acceptable under the grant. So I'm not sure how else, other than explain it, which I'd be glad to do.
Well, that's what we're here for, obviously.
Okay, well,
So,
I'd be glad to explain it to you.
yeah, that's why I'm asking questions. That's what
Okay,
I'm doing.
fine.
So I'm just wondering where this, I mean, we magically, it appears
It's
to have
not
money,
magic.
but we talk about other parts of the budget.
Magically, listen, there's no magic here. It's all facts. So I'm not sure what you're trying to characterize, but it's not magic.
Well, if you go back to the previous page, then page 5, how about some clarification on that?
Sure.
So we have the, so the program and project coordinator, marketing director was a half-time last year. Now it's 1.5 this year, from 48,000 to 93,000.
Again, our reorganization, we're adding another individual under that position.
So,
As you know, I've added, which you've utilized, one of our employees is, you know, Trevor. I mean, we do add employees, which a lot of these employees help the city out, so I'm not sure.
I don't disagree with that. I'm sure they
Okay.
do add value. My question is, again, so we have a half-time employee making a full-time salary.
Excuse me?
If you have one and a half at 93,000, I mean, where's your, so you have 93,554. I understand it went up 45,000 because you went from a half to 1.5. I get that. But of that 1.5, the full-time person makes, to me, I would assume you just would have left it a half-time and then added the full-time in there.
Correct.
Or is the 1.5 all one person?
Excuse me?
The program and project coordinator and marketing director went from a half to 1.5.
I now have a full-time and a part-time.
So, right, so my question is, the full-time person, if you went from a half, last year the half-time person was a full-time salary, 49,272.
He did not earn, these aren't the budget controlling numbers. That, if he worked full-time, he would have made that number. He only worked part-time. That would have been that amount if he worked full-time.
So what did he actually make then?
Less than that because he worked part-time.
But the budget, it was 48.
This is not the budget, this is just a detail.
So if this isn't the budget, what are we looking at right now?
Budget is in the pages that we were going over.
So we have budgeted then for a 1.5-time person. My question being, if it's.
This is not necessarily what happens for the full year. This is just what we look to see how the organization is organized for a given year. We
So-
have numbers, the controlling numbers are in the budget, and those are the limits that we have. And, you know, whether we add a person or subtract a person, as long as it's within the budget, that's what happens. These are a snapshot of what we think is going to happen during the year.
So you think you're
We
going to
don't
pay?
make changes just at January 1, we make changes all during the year. These are just an idea of what we think is going to happen during the year.
So you think you're going to pay a half-time person a full-time salary?
That's not exactly right, because I just explained that.
But it's budgeted for
This
a
is not the
half-time.
budget, this is just what, I'm not sure where you want to go with this.
I don't either, because it's budgeted for 93,000. What do you, I mean, you're
Well,
saying it's
how
not
would
the
you like
budget,
me-
but it's the budget.
Well, how
So
would
it's
you
not the
like-
budget, but it's the budget.
How would you like me to show it? I'll be glad to do that.
I would like to see what we have budgeted for the half-time position, what we have budgeted for the full-time position. I mean, you're at 1.5 at $93,554. I guess my concern is,
Right now, the person is working part-time, and so if we work full-time, we change to full-time, then that would be the budget.
so the person might go from part-time to full-time, maybe.
President Williamson, I have no idea where this is going.
I just-
Mr. Slaughter has the floor, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my original question, it's going from $48,071 to $93,554. It goes from a half-time to 1.5 times. So if you add a full-time position, why didn't that become a separate, it went to 1.5? So there's no justification for that then?
No justification. Okay, no justification.
I'm asking.
Well, what would you like to know? I
An
have
answer
one and a
would be
half
nice.
persons in that position now. I have a
But you,
person.
yeah,
I mean, I go through all the retirements if you like. Kate Tenney is retiring next year after 30 years. Now that position, her position is in there. The new full-time person that's taking her place is the additional person there.
right, so we don't know what's going to full-time and what's going to half-time salary. When we look down through the budget, I mean, the other, so is all of the salary detail just maybe, maybe not? Is this,
It seems to me like what we're maybe after is a little bit of a narrative of exactly what's happening, because there is a bunch of shifting around this year in RBT's budget. And we appreciate that things change around and that people retire, and that retirements do provide a great opportunity to move things around in a way that you haven't been able to previously. But I think maybe, and it sounds as though in order to help a little bit with understanding exactly what the reorganization is that's intended out of RBT, it might help to see something written. That is to say, if we've implemented a call center, that's terrific. If it's working well, that's even better, right? And I'm sorry for interrupting you, Councilman Slaughter.
No, that's
I'm just
fine.
trying to cut to the chase, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is you want to know what's going on, and it doesn't seem to me like anybody's going to sort that out from looking at salary detail because of things like retirements and replacing somebody mid-year, all of which makes sense. You're right, Mr. Nichols, when you're operating on a fiscal year versus the way that we budget. And these photos are going to be terrible, and I'm real sorry. All of which is to say that I would suggest that perhaps the wisest course of action, since I think that the numbers, relatively speaking, line up, is Mr. Nichols, if you could perhaps just give us a summary of what you're looking at, not tonight, but in general, a summary of what's going on at RB2 with retirements and new hires and/or promotions, such that you're covering the staffing needs, but how it's going to look changed. I think that would be helpful, because all of
Well, I
us.
tried to characterize, we have a lot of retirements, we're shifting things around. If you look at the budget, it's still within like a 2.5% increase, but we're taking the opportunity to make changes based on a fiscal year, a calendar year. You know, I'm not sure how best to show it.
And I understand that. I mean, you can put 4.67 people in one office and 0.33 in another, but that's also going to inspire a couple of questions. So I don't know that anybody's exactly disputing that. The questions that we have are when we get questions about what's going on, when Katie Tinney retires, and when
typically, you
when
know,
whoever retires. It's nice for us to be able to tell people what's
Typically, I
going
have the
on.
ability to sit down with someone, explain it, because it is complicated, and usually that's how we go through this, but I want to take the time tonight to go through it all, but I'm always, available
We have
for-
another budget
for
session.
individual meetings to go over things that may not be clear.
I think my suggestion would be that we have another budget session coming up next time, if you might have time to give us a little bit of a summary of what's going on, that might satisfy everybody, and then we wouldn't need to take up anybody's time with it.
People retiring, people are being replaced. I mean, that's essentially what's happening.
We can discuss it in a little more detail, exactly what I think we would appreciate knowing after council, if that's helpful, after the budget session, if that's helpful. But I think all I would be saying is the city hasn't seen this level of restructuring that it looks like we're talking about at RVT in quite a while.
Well,
So it might be
typically
helpful for us to understand what RVT's got going on.
Well, we
And
have-
maybe the city should see that level of restructuring, I'm not, but
Well,
maybe
I
that too
think
would be
that
helpful.
that's, any organization is trying to do a better job, does reorganize, does restructure. And again, a salary detail is to give you a snapshot of how things look right now. Things do change, and they will change. If you're saying a department doesn't, only changes January 1, that's absolutely ludicrous.
But I think there is some value in understanding, hey, in reality, this is how many people worked in each one of those titles at the beginning of 2018, at the end of 2018, and what we're looking at for, based on what we know now over the course of 2019, including we'll have a full-time assistant manager, assistant general manager through a third of the year or something along those
Well,
lines, at which time we intend to go from 4 to 5 transportation supervisors, subject to something that might change.
Well, my style is to try to give you as much detail as possible. Which typically doesn't happen in other areas, but that's my style. And that's why, I gave you highlights and things that you ordinarily don't receive. But trying to be more detailed comes back to haunt you, then, geez, why do it? But I still would like to try to make it as clear as possible what we're doing. Essentially what happened was Assistant General Manager of 39 years is retiring, using that opportunity to add another supervisor because of what I feel we need more supervision, and I feel we can get by without an Assistant General Manager. Kate Tinney is retiring, so I'm restructuring how that all works. I mean, she was there for 38 years, so things didn't change. Now things are changing. So, however you'd like me to describe it, that's basically the two changes that we're going to see, and no one's getting a $13,000 raise. And, it's tough for me to be accused of giving someone a $13,000 raise after 40 years of service, but I guess maybe I'm losing my mind.
Bill, another,
Within your budget at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say that.
Bill, another simple thing that could help in this situation is if you could double-check any of the numbers in terms of what you said tonight. Oh, I missed, that should be a 5 instead of a 4, or that should be a 7.5 instead of 9. If you could double-check those numbers and just update them in the sheet.
Sure.
That might be a significant part of
Yeah, I
the
think that
solution. I think the floor is still yours, Mr. Slater.
So we'll get an update at the second budget session, Councilman?
So at least a couple updated pages for the salary detail, 5 and 6, and then maybe a follow-up on what Ms. Mealy suggested.
Sounds good.
Again, the numbers in the budget, whether it be driver, supervisor, whatever, those are controlling numbers. We try to give a best description of how we're allocating those dollars to best run our operation. And it will change. I mean, I can't.
A way to parallel that similar discussion was a few years ago, well, for a number of years when we were talking about, say, police department, we would say we budgeted this number of officers.
Right.
But I think we tried to stop thinking about it that way, so to give ourselves more flexibility in terms of sequencing hirings and replacements and that sort of thing by saying, we budgeted this amount of money. How many officers can we get with that amount of money, given some are going to be in training, some are going to be on the force, some are going to be.
And so
That's kind of, the budget number, when you say it's a controlling number, the budget number can be used flexibly within that broad
Correct.
category of operations, for example.
Correct. So the easy way, I just show the same numbers over and over. That's not what I like to try to. I'm trying to show you, how we're going, especially with the retirements and everything. I think it's important to show. So again, salary detail is just a snapshot.
Right.
At the beginning of the year.
And I
that's
think-
not, so if you put 22 Lifeguards, that doesn't mean you hire 22 lifeguards. You may only hire 6. I mean,
But I'm sure you can see that I mean, as one piece of the example to explain the question, the answers to the questions is changing the supervisors from 4 to 5 would help clarify that one particular question, because that's your intention.
Well, but we
By
don't
the
have-
end of next year, you'll have 5.
we don't have 5 right now. So which way do you want to show it?
Well, under current versus proposed. Currently, you have 4. You're proposing probably 5.
So do I show a half? Is
I
it
guess my-
half a year?
I guess my preference would be,
Because a part-time, because I put a full-time salary provided for marketing, but I only use part-time, so that didn't go over very well after.
Right, which still doesn't.
well, I'll encourage you to think a little bit more about how to answer the questions.
Just tell me how you want to show it.
Mr. Slaughter,
This is the way we've done it for 4 years. Of course, that doesn't mean, you need to continue that. I understand that.
was that everything, Mr. Slaughter?
For now, yeah, we can review.
Mr. Allison?
We didn't get to page 6 yet.
We're still on page 4.
Okay. It just,
I'm trying to remember that we're
yeah,
still
when
on.
we get to page 6, we'll see the salaries for
Planning.
what we're talking about.
Right.
And what was budgeted in 2018, and the increase during the year,
Right.
or half a year, whatever it was. So then,
As the controlling number that Mr. Nichols was talking about. Sure. Anything else for page 4? Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. Can I just offer maybe a clarification that may help? On the salary detail, we have a column that says current, a column that says proposed, and that's the number of employees. Then you have the 2018 budget and the 2019 budget. If we were to put a date above those columns, above the current, you'd have November 2018. It's
Right,
not,
and
it's
that's
not
what-
December of 2017.
No, this was updated to reflect,
Exactly.
again, a snapshot.
Exactly,
when
and
we
I think
presented-
that's the clarification.
Right.
Because those numbers that says current, that's right now.
Right.
That's not what was last year.
Right.
That's right now.
That's the way, I know that no other department does that, but this is supposed to give you a snapshot of where we are, at the budget, where we are currently, so you can make
Right.
an apples-to-apples comparison, where you are now, and, what you're proposing for the next year.
So that the 2018 number, the 2018 budget cost is what we decided at December of 2017. But the current is actually what we're doing a year later. And then the proposed is what we imagine we'll be doing a year from now. And so you've got 3 different years on that salary sheet. But I think that may help to clarify some of the confusion when you are trying to examine from last year's salary detail to this
You
year's.
said that a lot better than I did, thank you.
Hearing no further questions on page 4, we'll move to page 5.
That's maintenance, the supervisor, $60,475, mechanics wages, $494,050, a total of $554,525. Bus repairs, $350,000, which is for our fleet of 33 buses. Materials and supplies, $25,000, uniforms, $15,000, and then tires and tubes, $62,000 per an approved contract that we have with Bridgestone, for a total of $1,006,525.
Quick question. How is the repair cost of the CNG buses compared to a regular bus of the same age?
That's hard to say because our fleet is so new.
Sure.
Which is like an unbelievable situation, which, so time will tell. The technology has improved so much that I'm very encouraged what's happened so far. The last generation of CNG buses was very problematic, but this new generation appears to be much better. Now, when you do make a repair or replace parts, they're much more costly than the parts of old, but so far, I think it's a very positive experience. Now, we've had to add a mechanic because of the technical needs that we need for, you know, buses have more computers than the first space travel to the moon. I mean, so technical. Everything is electronic, from fare boxes to the engine transmission, CNG, what have you. So it's become more of a technician type repair than, you know, a heavy-duty type repair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on page 6, 5? Hearing none, page 6, please.
The planning budget just recently brought in an agreement with the county. That was for the planning grant of $56,250, and this is federal funds that pass through the county to RVT. Then the planning funds that we get directly from FTA, $100,000, the match, $37,500. Then the money transfer from the operating budget, $450,000. Transfer from other sources, that's $315,700. And this is where the money that we get from Best Transit, that's allocated by the state through Best for management services, that's where that comes. And then transfer from PennDOT, that's a demonstration grant that we'll be getting each year for the Clinton County service for a total of $1,259,450. On the expenditure side, the salary under the planning budget, $683,950. FICA life insurance, health insurance, benefit costs, the fee surveys that we're required to do each year, $15,000. Planning expenses, $80,000, and those are a lot of the contractual consulting services that we pick up in partnership with the city. Special studies, $25,000, for example, like Park Avenue, and demonstration grants, so that's the expenses related to Clinton County of $350,000 for a total of $1,259,450.
Questions? Ms. Mealy?
Just, well, quick question. Is this where the funding, excuse me, where does the debt service funding from page 1, the
Next budget.
$225,000?
Trade and
Next
transit,
budget is where,
yes,
okay,
next
would you
one.
point that out to me when it arrives there?
Yep.
Great. And the increase in salaries here was from, just in the 2018 budget, the $40,000 or whatever that salaries increased was related to the call center or related to?
This was the plan, let's see, the expense, yeah, the only difference was that change from the addition of the person under the marketing line item that we were talking about is where,
Got it.
with Katie retiring, now I have a new,
So this is the training?
replaced with a new person that's the event center planner, handles all the, what Katie used to do, Hiawatha, the event center, the trolleys, those type of things. So it's just how I rebudgeted it going into next year.
Got it. All right, I think that's it for my questions.
Mr. Schletter?
So the 278 from other sources, that's all for the management of Best, or that's other,
For last year or this year?
either? Does that all comes from Best or
No,
other
it's also,
sources?
no,
What
it's
else do
also from the parking authority, a little bit from the Hiawatha, primarily.
we have? And so, does that offset for the RVT employees that go the Best, does that offset the cost for them to,
Yes, yes.
so so how do we know how much time they spend at RVT and how much time they spend at Best?
There's the employees, the way I have it structured is it's either Best or not Best. For example, you know, the one program manager, it's all charged off to Best. I try to stay away from that because if necessary, we do it that way, but the cost allocation, it's just a percentage, do time studies or whatever if necessary to do that, and that's what PennDOT has approved. But I try to make it a position that's entirely charged off to Best or not. But I'm a compliance person is all Best because of the shared ride program.
So our compliance officer under planning is all best?
The planning compliance officer, yes, is all best.
So that salary detail, so that entire salary then is absorbed through best?
Correct.
Okay. So they only get a check from best, they don't, or they get a check from us,
Yes,
but through best, from best,
from RVT,
but subsidized by best.
correct.
Yeah, I think the updated would help, I think, Wednesday to know who's doing what. And I think that would be very helpful. Because we have people working at Best that get a check from RVT that's in the salary detail, but Best is separate. It's just a little,
Well, I think we've been having some discussion, if I can once again break in, since I'm just going to steal the floor over and over again tonight. My apologies, Dr.
Apparently.
Williamson. We've been having discussions as well about RVT's multiple roles in multiple counties at this point, and how undoubtedly confusing it is both for us, trying to understand how they fit into a city budget, and also for RVT, I think, trying to separate the activities they take on when they work in multiple counties. That, I think, is something that we need to be looking at a little more intensely in the coming year, to figure out a way that we can sort that out that makes sense for RVT
Well-
and for us.
Again, I try to be very detailed, and when the best contract and all the PennDOT contracts, they came before council with all the delineation of duties, who was doing what, when, and where. So everything you see here was brought before council previously in great detail.
And
That's
I
not what
think-
I'm saying, Mr. Nichols.
Yeah, I think Ms. Mealy is saying in this case that as the responsibilities of RVT have expanded across well beyond the boundaries of Williamsport and including well beyond the boundaries of Lycoming County, the organizational structure, as you and I have discussed, has had a hard time keeping up because River Valley Transit is technically the Williamsport's Department of Transportation by structure, but is serving.
98% of the funding comes to federal state government, and those mandates
Right.
take precedent. That's why I shared with you that certificate, because I wanted to assure you that, of course, those of you who've taken the time to meet with me and go over all this know that we try to do the best job possible, but
And
just want to
one-
ensure you that, that the controlling agencies seem to be okay with what we're doing.
And one of the things I know you and I have just discussed is there a process that we can all go through to think through the organizational structure in a way that helps you accomplish the broader mission that you now oversee across 4 counties and maybe more?
Well, some of you have been very involved in that process, which I appreciate, but,
Absolutely. All right, if there are no other questions, then on page 6, we'll move to page 7.
Trade and Transit Center, lease rental income, $210,000. That's that cost-sharing arrangement in the Third Street parking garage, which we were able to grant to help construct. Also includes CTL, Uptown Music, and the Midtown parking lot. Revenues from the museum, $15,000. Donation grants, $10,000. Interest income, $1,000. Again, the transfer from the operating budget, $650,000. Program income, $450,000. And that's primarily from Church Street. Salaries, $325,000. You saw a significant increase because we beefed up security, which I think is an important element to have throughout those facilities in the downtown. FICA, life insurance, health insurance, related benefit calls, purchase services. Purchase services is $250,000. And again, those are all the costs with operating our facilities in the downtown, from PPL, gas, water, cleaning services, et cetera. It's Supplies and materials, $50,000. Contingency, $2,500. Debt service, $600,000. That's where that shows up. And exhibit expenses, development, $50,000. Again, those are things that, maintenance for exhibits and things like cleaning the rail car, painting the rail car, other things we try to do to keep that in top shape, for a total of $1,336,000.
Questions? Mr. Allison?
CTL and Uptown, are those multi-year leases?
Yes.
Do you know-
CTL, well, yes, CTL picked up the remainder of the chamber lease, if you recall. On the third floor, Uptown was a 29-year lease. And CTL has obviously had a lease and added to it. And the Third Street is a 99-year lease, I think.
Thank you.
Remember way back, and that, again, this goes back to the first development, Trade and Transit, we were able to work with the federal government and doing an upfront capital lease payment in the amount of $2,200,000. It went towards the Third Street parking garage. It was a unique, innovative financing thing that we worked out with the federal government, and it made, in addition to the extra money that came from the county, that helped fund the Third Street parking garage. We developed a formula for cost-sharing arrangement for the parking fees, and so, you know, that's how a lot of these projects we've been able to do through innovative financing and leveraging certain things, you know, when we do something like that in the downtown.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Mealy?
That 225,000 is in this 450, I'm assuming? From page
The-
1, from the Church Street?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, thank you, that's correct.
got it.
Other questions? Mr. Slaughter?
And the revenue and expenditures, just, they work out to the dollar exactly?
Which ones?
For both, I mean, on page 7, I'm just saying that it just happened that our revenue and our expenditures were perfect?
Well, that's the goal, have a balanced budget. I mean, you know, it could be off. You know, you try to, again, these are separate budgets. They you know, relate to part of the operation. You know, we can't commingle with the other parts, so they have to stand alone. So we have to obviously be cognizant of making sure that the revenues match expenses, and that's what our RBT is. It's a little different because, you know, in our operation, we have to generate the revenues to match the expenses, unlike the remainder of the city budget where, you know, they just worry about the expense side, not the revenue side. So, you know, it is a little bit different, I understand that, and try to explain as best I can.
All right. Seeing no other questions, move on to page 8.
Capital projects, again, typically, a capital project, most cases, a federal, state, and local match. In this case, for 2019, the state has a CNG initiative, so we've been able to fund our fleet replacement through the state and that particular program. So this represents the last 4 buses to complete our conversion in 2020. So the state share is $2,480,000, local match is $50,000. And another local match from, we do get money from the county for certain services related to capital. And then there's the Old City Gateway match. I'm going to give an updated number, which you had in the information I handed out. The total match, if you want to call it that, including the gateway building of the college, $15,328,75, and the gateway grants that we've been able to secure, including local, is a total of $7,710,486. So $25,611,361, and then the expenditures matched that at $25,611,361. So Third Street, we're moving, you know, as expeditiously as we can. We're very close to letting the bid, and so there should be a lot of dirt flying next year.
Questions on page 8? Ms. Mealy?
With apologies if I lapsed my attention for a sec, Mr. Nichols, you said that the RBT projects are related to 2 buses, that 2.4
4.
million? 4 buses, excuse me. Yeah, sorry, that would be a heck of a number for 2 buses. Got it. That is to say the pedestrian walkway is not foreseen in the 2019 budget currently?
No.
Okay, got it. That's everything I have.
Other questions for page 8? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. We move on now to pages 4 through 6 in the city's general fund budget, which is income estimates. Does that remain you?
Adam?
Do you need a bathroom break, Mr. Nichols?
No, I'm all right. Okay. Page 4, starting with real estate current. This first line item is real estate current, and for 2019, the proposed budget amount is $13,645,684, and there's a formula to get to that number, and it's an amount determined by a calculation on the first page in the miscellaneous section of your budget book. You'll see that that page shows the market value of Williamsport tax for real estate of $951,297,130, which is provided by the county. The assessed value ratio remains at 100% of the assessed value of the real estate. Therefore, applying the proposed real estate tax rate of 15.37 mils generates real estate tax revenue of $14,621,437. So to get to the budget amount, we subtracted the estimated LRTA abatements of $80,000 and then applied a collection rate of 92%, which has been consistent for many, many years, which then gives you a budget number, as indicated in the book, of $13,645,684. Line item in the next 5 line items as proposed were also calculated based on the recommendations in the financial plan. So that said, that's where we get that particular number. Add 2% to it. You're looking at,
Quick question before you move on to the
add
rest.
2% to that, that's, if you're looking at that.
So the number from the projected revenues, you're adding 2% to have the budgeted line item?
To the first 6 line items, instead, you know, is, again, working with the cap idea in the financial plan, working with, you know, a different way of looking at the budget, instead of the conservative way that we've done that 3% on revenues, looking at the financial plan the last 7 years, a trend analysis, looking at the ending year balances, looking at budget to actual estimate, you know, that's where we
We've
feel
typically
comfortable in
seen-
doing it a little bit different, building in that economic development factor of 2%.
Okay.
To these numbers. So it's a little
Okay.
bit different, but that's the idea of using those caps and then filling up to the cap.
And so just to clarify, to make sure that everyone's following the same explanation, if we were to look at the comparative equity statement and look at actuals, which I hear go back to 2014, but I know you have further back, of current, real estate current line item, that what we typically see after we accounted for any tax increases over that time, we'd see a 2%, more or less smoothed out, a 2% increase in real estate taxes just from economic growth activity?
You know, just take
Over the
into
last 5
consideration
to
if you
10
can
years.
visualize a new Sheets, Burger King or a new development or whatever, then
Right.
that assessment will kick in at some point. It may not be picked up by the market value from the analysis by the county, so. But
Right.
it seems like there's always a little more generated from just the pure calculation of the real estate taxes. So again, we're using a conservative number of 2%.
Okay.
You know, the GDP is 3.5 to 4%. Seems like economic growth. I mean, we should be a beneficiary of economic growth, and so, again, this is just that plan that we did is just a blueprint, and we're using bits and pieces of it, and that's, again, something different with the idea of caps and other way of estimating things in this particular budget.
Okay. The other question I had is back on the projected revenues page for real estate current. No, this is actually for Mr. Grimes. Usually we see that number vary, you know, a few $100,000 or, you know, maybe $1 million in terms of the number provided by the county for current market value. And usually it's easy to think about why that occurred, but either because of work at the hospital or something else like that. But in this year, the valuation changed by about $5 million. Is most of that attributable to the things that you bring to us over the course of the year? In particular, I'm thinking of the hotel valuation that changed this year.
There's more than just the hotel, but to be very honest, being so long since a countywide reassessment, there's so many properties that are above and under what they should be assessed. And what happens in a city is these businesses, especially the larger ones that have multi-million-dollar assessments, when they feel their assessment's too high, they appeal that and get that reduced.
And nobody appeals an
Nobody
assessment
appeals
that they
it the
feel
other
is
way,
too low.
which is why we've seen townships and school districts start to debate, and some of them start to implement reassessing or appealing an assessment based on sales. Because the disparity just grows more and more from correct assessments to incorrect assessments, and when all you do is lower assessments when they're too high and never raise them when they're too low, you're just going to see that number continue to drop.
Thank you. I keep hearing a growing drumbeat from people across the county encouraging the commissioners to implement a new assessment. And so I was glad to see that they've begun the process by allocating some money, I believe in their next year budget, towards that process. I'm not sure the time frame that they're looking at, but I know that many people in the county would very much encourage that reassessment to happen sooner rather than later for the very factors that you're talking about here. It's about equity across the taxpayers within the city and also across the county. So thanks for the explanation for why we see the valuation here dropping by about $5 million. Mr. Nichols, I know we're on page 4 there, so if you want to go ahead and finish out that page.
Sure. Real estate prior, $841,500. Wage tax, $2,142,000. Local services tax, $1,096,500. Mechanical devices, $20,400. Business privilege mercantile tax, $2,116,500. Nothing prior. Real estate transfer, $306,000. Interest penalties, $240,000. Discounts allowed, a negative $250,000, and the tran proceeds, $2 million. Again, that's last year we only used $200,000, which was pretty amazing, thanks to Joe. So, and that's just a maximum number that hopefully won't be needed. Keep on going. License and permits. Comcast, $224,000, other $115,000, plumbing licenses, contractor registrations. I think there's a variety of things in there. Building permit, $620,000, working with Joe Girardi and predictions of major projects that could be upcoming. And talking with UPMC and what they have involved, we feel comfortable with the number of $620,000. Because of their building plans. Street excavation permits, $50,000 for a total $1,009,000. Fines and forfeits, traffic fines state, $13,000. Traffic fines restitutions, $40,000. Traffic fines, which our officers write, parking tickets, whatever, $5,000. Magistrate fees, our share, $95,000 for a total of $153,000. Then under interest received, $30,000 based on more favorable interest rates. Tax investment income, $300 for a total of $30,300. Indirect costs from RVT, $75,000 to the city. Recreation program income, $27,000. Recreation sponsorships, which was suggested in the financial plan, $20,000. Pool admissions, $33,000. Pool concessions, $1,000. Rescue operations fee is as described and recommended in the financial plan, $20,000. Towing fees, $15,000. Rental inspections, $51,000. Special events, $30,000. Real estate income from departments and other programs, workers' comp, $10,000, codes, $2,000, the controller, $100, finance, other, $90,000, fire, $5,000, police, $60,000, streets and parks, $2,500, treasurer, $9,000, surplus property sales, $111,000. That's based on a recommendation financial plan in Elm Park and discussion with the Visitors Bureau or other opportunities with that particular property. Bowman Field naming rights, $40,000. The surplus refund, rebate, Benetcon, $350,000. Health insurance, employee contributions, $25,000 for a total of $976,600.
Thank you. Let me stop you there and ask for questions on pages 4 and 5. Mr. Allison.
Back to the building permits. And I understand UPMC has, and you've talked to Mr. Girardi. Is there any possibility we could get some of the backup documentation on how that figure was arrived at? Because it's not that I'm doubting anybody, but with, we're banking a lot on that increasing this year, so.
Oh, yeah, glad to
Yeah.
talk to Joe. And I know I did have a discussion, and I tried to do some due diligence on that as well, and, yeah, so
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I did go back through,
I'm not sure how much they want to reveal, but I
yeah.
think there should be some internal documents that,
It's probably, it's math, but there's
Right.
somewhat of an art to it as well, I think. And when I went back to the comparative equity statements, back to the 2014, some years we thought we'd be down, we went up, and other years we thought we budgeted up and it went down, significant amounts. So,
well,
this being one of those tough years, I'd like to,
I can't stress enough that you know, I think the idea of a financial plan and saying that the budget's a working document is a little bit different, and pay attention to details. It doesn't stop December 31st. It's
right.
a work in progress every day of the year, so those things need to be paid attention to. So it's going to be, it has to be a lot different next year in this budget in terms of accomplishing things that have been proposed, that are a little different, and so, you know, those are things that you have to pay attention to, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank
I
you.
agree 100%.
And the, on the next page, the Benetcon health surplus, we had some unusual circumstances this year, but we're expecting things to smooth out as much as we can.
Yeah, and the difficulty with that is that you're projecting essentially, even though it's budgeted in 2019, it's really, if you look at the accounting accrual system that we're under, that number reflects what we won't find out until 2020.
Right.
So you're really using, you know, predictions and, you know, your best case scenario and working with Benetcon to give you an idea and looking at trends and all that kind of stuff. So that's a tough one right there.
That's a tough one, yeah. But we're banking on things breaking.
Well, that's lower than usual, so
Yeah.
I feel comfortable with that
Okay.
number, more so than some previous numbers that we were able to attain, but I think this year it's really important to be as precise as you can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions on pages 4 and 5? Ms. Meehan?
So I understand the concept of 2% growth, but how are we planning to drive that? When we look at these slightly inflated numbers for wage tax, local services tax, business privilege and mercantile tax, sorry, and perhaps I'm, sorry, misreferencing, or not speaking clearly. our income estimates call for an increase across the board in a number of things which actually decreased this year over our expectations.
Which,
So the real estate prior, we budgeted 825,000. We received 800,000, yet we're budgeting 841.5 next year. I understand the concept of sort of looking to ourselves to make up a budget gap, but I'm not quite certain how we might plan to do some of that in this circumstance. With the prior real estate taxes, with the wage tax, with the local services tax, all of those numbers are over last year's budget numbers when they fell below last year's budget numbers this year in our actual income. Are these based on, is the treasurer estimating that we're going to see more money in those tax areas?
No, I think all these incomes were based on a formula that was used by finance, or not really projections based on,
Okay. I mean, and I understand that we're using a different formula, but I'm just asking how we're intending to meet the goals that we're setting for ourselves if it's a
well,
formula.
you know, if you look at the wage tax, the 2% was on the lower amount. So in certain cases, you know, we try to make an informed decision which number to use. But like I said, the lower amount we did
Right.
use, and also on the other ones, we used the lower amount.
Okay.
So it was a
I'm
mix.
looking, and we
It was
don't
a mix.
have, yeah, we do. Okay. Hang on, I'm just pulling those numbers back up just so I can get a look here. I guess I'm just, I understand your smoothing concept, but I'm not necessarily seeing it reflected in the numbers for 5 years prior.
Well, if you look, it's always come in higher. If you look at the trend, it's been more of a positive than a negative, and this was, we felt more of an anomaly that went down a little bit from the budgeted amount.
Right.
But the rest of them were used on the lower number, or the estimate. So I see your case
I
in that
guess
one.
my point is that there are certain things, while I think it might be asking a little much in the first year for us to think that rec should generate an extra $30,000 in income this year, at least we know who we're asking to generate that increase. But when we say that we think that wage taxes and local services tax will go up, there isn't really anything that we can do to affect that. We're simply, I
More
understand we're
employees.
banking on the
Yeah, I know.
numbers, but it makes me a little nervous to bank on the numbers to the tune of, you'll pardon me, maybe, what,
Which goes to, why do we?
300,000, yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
so,
that's a gap when our ending fund balance is proposed to be $107,000.
I know, well, and again, you don't have to pay attention to the financial plan at all. It was just trying to provide you more information, a foundation, a blueprint, whatever.
No, the
And
financial
that-
plan I thought was very well
I
executed.
don't-
But,
You know, it may come back to haunt us, or me in particular, but I'm, you know, trying to give you some more, you know, something to, because we're at a crossroads here, we need to be really diligent. I mean, not that we weren't before, but we have to be more proactive, I think, just trying to find revenues. You know, the mayor's tried very hard to do that, but
so these don't reflect any particular decisions that we may make about business privilege and mercantile tax, any decisions that we might make. I'm looking to the interest received element. Is there, what, clearly that's more than a 2%
we didn't
increase.
use, no, we didn't
What
use.
is our vision for interest? Are we trying to move money around a little more?
Oh,
Helping
yeah,
pull
we've
in
been
some
talking with
interest? Okay.
financial institutions, absolutely.
Okay, so
Those-
so there is something that we
That
can
will happen.
physically do for the interest received line item
Absolutely,
that will return some income? Okay.
Absolutely.
But you're not
Controller's
telling me
office
that
will help
there's
with that.
any projected plan for increasing these other line items, anything the administration is proposing to do precisely when we're looking at wage tax, local services tax, and business privilege, mercantile tax, and real estate transfer. There's nothing we're planning to do to bring those numbers up. There's nothing that we can do. Am I accurate in saying that?
Probably.
In a 1 year?
Yeah, I agree
mean,
with that.
in a long-term timeframe, there are things that we can do.
In the
a
estimate, though,
short-term
we're
timeframe-
simply looking
timeframe
at the trends and trying to
Okay.
come up with, and that one has always been on the favorable side, but then like the other ones, we use a lower number, so it was a mix and match, you know, what we thought
Okay.
using that idea. And again, that can be
Just-
totally ignored, but given sort of a new way of trying to come up with,
Got it.
especially with a minimal, a lower tax rate increase. It's just, we put a lot in the pot, so,
Yeah, on this specific point too, if we're looking at the taxes lines, what we see here is a total that goes up $966,000 over the prior year budget. Now, if I've done the quick math correctly, it's about $650,000 of that from the
Tax
proposed
increase.
tax
Right.
increase. So you subtract that out, and it's about I'll call it $300,000 of increase. My guess is if we went back and looked at the details between the actual estimate as of Thanksgiving of any particular year versus, and the comparative equity statement is actuals, once the year is closed out. Sure. If we went back to all of the ones that are actually closed out, my guess is the actuals, if that makes any sense. It probably does to council if no one else. The actuals are higher than the actual estimates on these revenue items, is more or less what I think Bill is saying. But the other thing that we've become accustomed to as a result is to just pick page 1 as our numbers, is we're often become accustomed to the estimated beginning balance for any budget year to be lower than the actual beginning balance ends up being once 9 months later you've done the audit. And I think one of the reasons, although there are several, one of the reasons the actual starting balance is consistently higher than the estimated starting balance when we're doing budgeting is because we haven't factored in essentially economic growth when we're coming up with our actual estimates for the current year when we're doing the next year's budgeting. And so if that $300,000 number is correct, and I think the history would show that Mr. Nichols is right, that it has been correct, at the very minimum, we have to stop relying on the actual starting balance to grow by that $300,000. In other words, if you're used to hitting snooze on your alarm clock so that you'll get up on time and then suddenly you factor that in on how many snoozes you can hit, stop it. I know I've gotten in that habit, and maybe we all have on budgeting. If we think we will get saved at the next audit because of the dollars that show up that weren't in the budgeting, we're now putting it into the budgeting to try to get more accurate figures. Now, I think what Mr. Nichols is also saying is correct. The way we've done it in the past has been sort of a conservative approach of revenue. I'm not saying that this is less conservative. I'm saying by being more transparent, there's less transparent, more trying to get a precise number, a more precise number in what the revenue will be for the purposes of the financial plan. It also gives us less padding in case we're a little bit off on the estimates. And so if I'm interpreting Mr. Nichols correctly, and you can tell me if I'm not, that's why you're emphasizing that the budgeting process, to the degree that we match up the budget to the financial plan, has to be not a one-time, once-a-year kind of effort. We need to continually seeing are we hitting the goalpost, the whatever the metaphor is.
We've made the target smaller.
Yeah, we've made the target smaller. And so that it should help us from a planning perspective, which is why I like the financial plan, but it is also scary because we have less room for error. And so I have other comments.
and
on
more
other sections.
challenges than you normally have. I mean, there's goals and performance factors in here that normally are not in there.
Right.
Typically, the budget's givens, not expectations. You know, it's a little different.
So I have questions on the other sections, but let me open it back up for other comments. Sure.
So if we're working with that 300,000 number, I'd be interested to hear our tax collector's perspective on that, since primarily he's going to be the one bringing that in.
I think as I answered to Ms. Mealy's question, is really this was used based on a formula of, you know, historical trends, what we think is going to happen. I could try to give a narrative on each one and make a more pinpoint, you know, representation of what it would be. But in either case, we're going to be over on some, under on others, whether, you know, it's just my trends that I see, or it's just a flat percentage. And we're probably going to end up at the bottom line somewhere near that. We don't necessarily know exactly which ones are going to be too high, which ones are going to be too low. I think with the earned income tax and local service tax going down, I'm not sure we're going to see that reversed anytime soon. You know, with the gas boom, we did have a few years ago a good increase there. Unfortunately, earned income tax is not paid to where you work; it's paid to where you live. And without the gas industry here in the same capacity as it was, a lot of these higher paying jobs that we have in the city and we create in the city live outside the city, and we don't see any of that income. So I think that number, you know, could be too high, but we might see greater numbers elsewhere.
Yeah. So that, you know, just looking for a double verification, I guess, you know, that in your estimation, this is logical and doable.
Yeah, it is logical, and, you know, we might not hit the mark, we might go over the mark, but
Right.
And we're being more diligent in certain areas. You know, earned income tax is really out of our control for the most part, but business privilege tax, we've continued to see that increase year over year because of more diligent efforts to be sure we have every business registered, every business, you know, that needs to be audited, and collecting more money there.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions on pages 4 and 5? Then let me get to my other questions. One, I think Mr. Pavlik probably has nightmares over the questions he received a year ago about the short-term borrowing that we do, tax anticipation note borrowing, and so I just want to commend him for managing, maybe with a few hiccups, but managing cash flow in the early part of this year, so that we ended up borrowing nowhere close to the $2 million that we reluctantly authorized a year ago, but instead only borrowed $200,000, and that's fully repaid, I'm assuming, at this point. And had the savings of that not borrowing $1.8 million for a month or two in terms of interest expense amounts to a savings in the budget of, trying to stretch this out to give him a second to come up with a number, $10,000 or $15,000, something along those lines. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for working hard to make that happen, Mr. Pavlik. I know we gave you a hard time a year ago, and to see that you listened and tried to save the city some money was very much beneficial. My next mark goes back down to what Mr. Allison was talking about with building permits, Mr. Nichols. You know, you and I have had a lot of conversations over the years about using historic averages, and I think that's what you're doing up in the taxes line items, and I think it makes sense, especially how it's framed in the financial plan that you and Mr. Pavlik put together. But what we had been doing is what Mr. Allison pointed out, smoothing out the building permits, and I think we've done that for two reasons. One, while we can look and see what do we anticipate the building projects next year to be, and how much revenue would those bring in, and we can even have high confidence about that. We don't know what the impact of, say, a big drop in the stock market would have on the money that somebody might be using for those big building projects, or any of a number of other things that might cause them to delay even 6 months a project that could have big impacts on our building permit revenue. And the other reason that we've used historical averages is that if you undershoot what actually comes in, you can treat it as a one-time source of revenue. It helps drop to the bottom line, helps to pave another road, et cetera. If you overshoot what you bring in, then not only do you have to make up that difference in the current budget year, but you also have to replace it in the next budget year if things return back to a normal level. And so, you know, I can understand the projection, but it does worry me given how small a target we need to hit in this particular year. And so we should all think about that one.
Yeah, and again, looking at it in a 3-year perspective, I totally agree. That's the whole, we should be thinking 3 years.
Yep.
And that kind of a number. So given confidence, again, and getting information on building plans over 3 years is what, you know, I'd like to share, that's sustainable for 3 years, not just 1 year.
Okay, all right.
And I think that's, yeah.
And that's
If we
important.
can't show that, then you make a very valid point that that's not real, it's not a real, it's that's sort of outside of what we should be doing.
Okay. The next question or next comment that I have is on page 5 then, that somebody earlier referenced interest received. And one, I've had conversations with Mr. Grimes about some of the ideas that are being bounced around, and I look forward to working with the finance department and with the treasurer probably early in 2019 to see what can be done there, because I think there's some real upside potential. And I think some of the research that Mr. Grimes has done, once we get down to work and can make that happen, can make a real difference as a truly, it's not new revenue sources, but expanded revenue source, which is something we're always looking for. Somebody also referenced the recreation program income and sponsorships. I know one of the things that we challenged Ms. Novinger a year or two ago about was that, and she embraced this idea, was that we had hoped that departmental revenue could exceed departmental programming expenses going forward, because sure, we have the capital expense, or the administrative expenses, excuse me, of the recreation budget, but the actual programming itself shouldn't be money losers. And so that might be an ambitious number, and I think it is, but as a target number, if I remember correctly, and of course we'll be reviewing this later, that's generally is an offset budget line, is that correct? And that expenses should never exceed the revenue on operations, on programming, I'm sorry, excuse me, within the recreation department. And we've had that conversation before, so I assume when we get to that page, we'll see those offsets or something better than the offset.
Well, the desire here is to increase the revenue over expenses by $20,000.
Right.
You know, and that's a challenge to myself somewhat in terms of taking the opportunity of what I've learned and raising money and sponsorships, all that with Hiawatha and other things, and maybe co-branding or whatever. So, you know, that's sort of
But
not
in
a
the
challenge just for Jessie, but it's a challenge for, you know, the whole city to help
Right.
her accomplish that, because I think it's easy to do. I really
And
do.
if we, you know, can hit, here we're showing 47,000 between program income and sponsorships. If we can hit that number, then we'll have something less than $47,000 of expenses
Right, right.
for programming over the course of the year. But if we exceed that number, then we can have more fantastic recreational opportunities in the city. And if we fall short, then we can have that more limited in scope. It doesn't have to get subsidized by other parts of the budget. It can be, revenue can be directly tied to expenses in that. And so to have the number grow is more aspirational than either a source of revenue or a source of new expenses. Much like in the Transportation Museum's new exhibits budget, there's a $10,000 inflow and a $10,000 outflow every year it's been a number of years since we've received any donations towards new exhibits, and so it's also been a number of years since we've had new exhibits. Those are matching dollars.
But the challenge is getting it started. Once you get it started, you develop a way to get sponsors to be involved in recreation, then it's almost self-sustaining. So, again, the way we're formatting this budget, a little bit different. We have challenges, performance factors, things like that. So it's something that we've got to get to work on right after the first of the year.
One more comment that I have is on surplus property sales. I know you referenced one or more city-owned facilities that are for that. Like we've had discussions in the past, the challenge of having a one-time source of income then becomes doubly more difficult to replace in the second or third year. And while, as you said, we may have documentation to help us understand how we would end up with 3 years of sustained building permit revenue, I know that we don't have 3 years worth of property that we can sell at that price. And so exactly what we might drop out of next year's budget to the tune of $100,000 that gets paid for this 1 year is something that we have to think about if we're going to budget that as a one-time source of revenue, expended in an operating budget.
Well, I can make something and say that meets the threshold of not having to worry about it. I'm just kidding.
All right, so that brings us to page 6. Oh, Mr. Slaughter.
Just at the bottom of page 5, the health insurance employee contributions for 2018 actual. Didn't the streets and parks contract, didn't they start contributing to the health insurance this year?
Good question. Joe?
They did along with members of the administration that were directed by the mayor. We budget a number on the revenue side. We budget the actual expense on the expenditure side. However, for financial statement purposes, we net the amount on the expenditure side. So you're just going to see the net amount once the audit numbers are all put together. So
there
when
was
we
income.
budgeted, we wanted, I think it was Councilman Williamson's idea to say he was trying to achieve a goal of the $25,000. And while you won't see it up here as showing as revenue, it's incorporated into the expenditures when we get to the actual balances throughout the budgets.
But I think what you're saying is you'd like to see what that number is. Even though it's a contra expense, it'd be nice to know what the number is.
Right.
Right, and I was going to, when we went through the HR budget, one of my intended questions was to see how many people were now contributing towards their healthcare premiums. And so hopefully if you can get that information, and total and specific to the 10 elected officials, or of the 10 elected officials, those that are on the healthcare plan.
Well, and that's one of the things in the plan, to have some sort of a healthcare, plan, getting everybody at least 5%. So there you're talking about $250,000. I mean, that's what we're recommending. How you get there, it's not an overnight situation, but it's something to work towards, I guess.
And I know that Mr. Allison and I have started brief conversations with Megan about, in what ways might the elected officials be able to continue to provide leadership in that front, going into a couple union negotiations in the coming year. And we've only just begun that discussion, but I think there'll be some additional, I'll call it leadership opportunities coming forward.
So we are going to get that number then? We will get that.
Yeah, we
employee
can get,
insurance.
Yeah, I'm very interested in it too. Thank you for asking. Any other questions on pages 4 through 6 then? Ms. Mealy?
Nothing except to say that I agree with you 100% about the surplus property sale in the budget. It doesn't seem to me that sorry, I hate having this thing in my face. That I agree with you about the surplus property sale. It seems unwise to me to build into an annual budget something which will be a one-time income item. And I don't know if I speak for the rest of council, but that's something I feel that we should look at heavily in the rest of this week and next.
Mr. Allison?
I just have a comment, and not that it means anything dramatic, but our real estate transfers were higher this year. And actually, I looked at the comparative equity statement, and it's the second highest in the last 5 years. So not by a whole lot. There's some years were way down, but we had a good year comparatively.
And I think that's a sign of future economic activity?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully. Other questions? Hearing none, then we can move on to the general government with the
We do
mayor's
page
office.
7:55 already.
That is true. It is 7:55 as we speak, according to the agenda.
Speaking of numbers, we should bring in line with reality one of these days.
What else would we laugh about on budget session, right?
It's true.
Okay. Good evening, City Council. Total personnel services, $155,266, and you've noticed that there has been an increase because of the $500,000 in the MMO. Purchase of services, travel, economic development, $0. Hearings and litigation, $125,000. And if you take a look at 2018, a great amount of funds were spent on negotiations and grievances. Office rent, $33,400. Other expenditures, SPCA, $28,000. Lycoming County Historical Society, $1,000. Citizens Corps, $1,000. Newberry Community Partnership, $2,000. Victorian Christmas, $1,000. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $3,500. Support equipment, $1,300. Total department expense for 2019, $341,666. Are there any questions?
I have a question just to clarify, because the page that I have is different, and Mr. Allison has as well, is different than the one that you just had, and is, I think, maybe a draft page?
Okay,
'Cause
I'm going to have to refer, this is what I was given.
Sure, no, I understand.
If I can refer to Mr. Pavlov?
And it's a small change where I think there was a number that was being worked out, some final detail. Okay.
The 9,800.
Yeah, and my guess is that was a working document.
Right.
Number, because I think that was a number that was used throughout.
Did you work the math? I didn't.
I did not, but 351, yeah, it looks like it's about
Yeah,
right.
it's about right.
Yeah.
It's exactly right.
He was reading from the one that's on the screen. What I was suggesting is that each of our books has a placeholder with a 5%, a 5% placeholder down at the bottom of the page. Yeah, so if you could, I think there's no real difference, except for,
Unless they're supposed to reflect that 5% cut,
Right.
in which case they're
yeah,
not.
Yeah, yeah.
okay, that's fine, just,
Well, actually, we can determine pretty quickly here which one's accurate.
oh yeah, that's true. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, let's put it this way, the number in hours is the number that's reflected in the general fund budget summary. That number is almost $10,000 higher.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
But in general, my guess is the categories will not change, while the actual dollar amounts will. So if anybody has questions about the categories, and the broad idea of the dollar amounts. We can follow up. 341 will be the number. Okay. So there'll be some reduction. And Mayor, do you happen to have in your notes where relative to that you're finding the savings? Let's plan just to start over on the mayor's page on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Is that fine with everybody?
Yes.
It's just a typo.
I did have some questions on the salary detail.
Let's come back to it Wednesday,
Okay, got it.
if you don't mind. Let's just keep all the questions together on the page till Wednesday. It's just
Yeah, Jonathan's probably.
cleaner that way.
Okay, got it.
We'll just do that first. It shouldn't take very long. Okay? Absolutely. Next, we have Mr. Winder, starting on page 13. How are you this evening?
Good, how about you? Thank you.
Good. You ready for your, let's see, we have you for about 25 minutes, so we should be done by 11 with you.
Let's keep it
Oh,
moving,
yeah,
Mr.
that'll work. Personnel services, total personnel services for 2019, $336,093. Purchase of services, training and travel, $2,000. Office rental, $2,700. Contract services, $65,000. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $2,500. Support equipment, $2,500. Telephones, $5,000 for a total departmental expense of $415,793.
All right, questions on page 13? Mr. Henderson?
Just looking at the contract services, we budgeted 40. We only used 10, and now we want to use 65.
The contract services for 2018, we use some of that for John Grado to come in and assist Mark Benner. And for next year, it's going to be used also for the East 3rd Street Gateway project.
In what sense? Sorry.
I'll refer that to Mr. Nichols. He's taking charge of the project.
East 3rd Street Gateway,
The version you have of the funding sources, the soft costs, there's about $600,000 worth of soft costs, including CM services, testing services, things like that. So we tried to put a little bit in this budget to help out with those costs. RVT and others are picking up the lion's share of those costs, but we had hoped that based on this year's budget, you know, we keep it around the same to help out with the East 3rd Street project.
is this the only place where East 3rd Street budget will come out, East 3rd Street project will come out of the general fund?
Yes. The rest is the allocation we had in the bond from, I forget, well, the money that was allocated from East 3rd Street in the bond, but the rest of it's in the RVT's budget. So there's no impact to general fund whatsoever. And it's,
Beyond this?
no, really? 7 million, what's that? Is there more?
No, beyond this, no.
Beyond this?
Oh.
I just didn't want you
Oh,
to
I
put a
said-
period in the wrong place in your
Beyond,
sentence.
I thought you said be honest.
Beyond this.
Did you say beyond this or beyond?
Beyond this. I
Pretend he
think
said
some
both.
kind of Freudian hearing problem here. Your guilt is hearing.
Did you hear it that way?
I did, yeah, I heard that, yeah.
I'm sitting next to him. He said
It's okay.
beyond this.
Beyond that.
That's why
But
I
I
pointed
think
it
that
at him.
both statements apply, so let's just go with both.
Beyond this.
I think it's
Beyond
lighting.
In the,
If we could get
in
Beyonce
that
done, that would solve a
spreadsheet
lot
that
of
we
the
have
financial.
for the 3rd Street project then, this would be reflected in that as well coming from the city, our local match.
It's about 10% of the soft costs.
Okay.
We came up with.
Thank you.
And I can give you that, show that. It's in your book, but I can highlight and give it to you on Wednesday.
Other questions on
And
page?
also, I'm hoping he's John Grado as well. I mean, if I can get him off the golf course.
Aren't we all? Ms. Mia?
Could you point out to me where that is in our book, the East Third Street costs and soft costs? Since we've heard a couple of times that there wasn't going to be any general fund cost, and I was actually under the impression that that might include the $250,000 we borrowed for it. So now that we're talking, what portion of contract services is the whole 65K for East Third?
Which one are you looking at?
I'm looking at page 13, line 2201-76060.
Oh, yeah. And you're referring that to the soft cost budget?
Well, I'd like to understand the soft cost budget. If that's detailed somewhere in here, then tell me where, because I must have missed
I
it.
think that's on the
It's on the
spreadsheet.
total, it's on the spreadsheet.
Okay. And I guess what I'm asking, so all of the contracted services that we've budgeted for streets and parks this year relate to, we're not leaving any budget for streets and parks for engineering services that we might require that can't be fulfilled because we haven't got an official engineer in the city? Or, it seems to me, I assumed that was what the contracted services line was referring to.
No, that's just an allocation for soft costs, professional service, and even for East Third Street, a small amount. Oh, there's your.
Is it or isn't?
Bill, I think the question is,
Thank
of
you.
that $65,000 line item on page 13, how much of the $65,000 will go to East Third Street soft costs? How much are being reserved for John Grado for other reasons? And how much of them are being reserved for other purposes?
Well, ideally, that number, I wanted to use $50,000 for soft costs and 15 for John Grado.
Does that answer, Mr. Anderson and Ms. Mealy, your question then?
One of them, can I?
Let me go back to Mr.
Okay.
Anderson, see if he's done first.
No, yeah, that does help, that satisfies my question.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Ms. Mealy?
Randy?
Ms. Mealy?
Okay, thanks for that breakdown. The $250,000 in borrowing for East Third Street, it seems to me was related to streetscape initially. If we're funneling it, was it not?
No, it's 500,
500?
yes.
Am I remembering the wrong
Each
one? Oh,
project
never
was
mind,
five.
yes, excuse me, it was 500.
Each one was 500.
Right, yeah,
of
2.5
Beaumont
million, that's why I'm getting the two and the 5. Okay, so it was $500,000. Didn't you just say the total soft costs were $500,000? And that the
No.
lion's share was being paid by RVT?
Well, soft costs include design engineering service picked up by the college, design engineering service we're going to have to pick up, CM fees, and that comes to around $500,000 or $600,000. Now, the $500,000 we're talking about, that's matching money. That's not for soft costs.
Okay, so the bond funding is not being used for soft costs, it's being
No,
used
that's
as
for
matching
matching.
money.
If you look at the spreadsheet, you'll see that the $500,000 matching money, Pine Street matching money for signals, the Green Light Go, matching money for East Third Street, 4th Street, and then there's only $16,000 for professional fees. So there's nothing provided for Reynolds, there's nothing provided for some other of those soft costs,
Which
permitting and all
can't
things
be
like that.
matching funds.
What's that?
You can't use soft costs as matching funds,
You can in certain cases, yes. Rackby,
but not in this case.
but Rackby's being used by the college, so we can't use that. See, there's sort of two parts to this, Lycoming College part and our part. So we each have our own soft costs, we have our own professional fees, so to speak. So, but the money from the city, the $500,000, is for the matching money, which is on the spreadsheet. And now we have some additional soft costs that RVT is picking up, but that would go primarily towards rentals, a small part of that.
So $500,000 total in soft costs between Lycoming College, RVT, and the city. $500,000 total.
Not the college.
Okay, so that does not include the college's soft costs. The $500,000 in soft costs
No, that
is
would,
exclusively the
engineering
city/RVT's.
fees, Larson, Reynolds, permitting, things like that. I can give you a breakdown on that.
I would appreciate
Yeah.
that. I'm trying to understand where that money's coming from. Okay.
Like I said, this is the last, the one October 18th is a good snapshot where we are right now, but this keeps changing as well slightly, but
We have a copy of that.
and again, since we had it in the budget and it's not a one-time thing, that's why I wanted to, keep it there.
Okay, just trying to understand, since we've heard multiple times that there is no general fund impact whatsoever to this project, so when there's suddenly $50,000 in general fund impact and a $500,000 expenditure of money that we borrowed for the purpose admittedly, but it's still, I've been somewhat under the understanding that it
Well,
wasn't involved in
again,
the
that's one
project.
thing, and that was a good way, we added that into the resolution ordinance, whatever, that those dollars had to be for matching, and that's exactly what we're using with them, not for
Right,
separate soft costs that, and again, again, we had that budgeted amount this year. Again, I still feel that, John Gray or whatever, it's just a small part of $7 million project, so we wanted to keep that in there for,
but presumably, a portion of then that $15,000 we're hoping to allocate toward engineering services will also be allocated toward the East Third Street project. Got it. I'll yield the floor to somebody else.
Mr. Allison?
You may have mentioned this and I missed it, the pensions increase?
You're gonna see that across the
board. Remember that?
We had a $500,000 increase in our MMO costs.
Okay, so that's just
And then with
spreading it out.
Yes.
some reduction of personnel, is gonna allocate higher amounts to other departments.
Other questions? Mr. Slaughter?
The office rental going down 5,400. Are you moving?
You'll
I'm not
see
moving.
that later on, tonight, in the Capitol, or the City Hall operating budget. We reduced the rent across the board by $33,000, I believe. And we've also reallocated it based upon current space usage. We haven't done that for a few years and like to evaluate that every few years. So some may go up or some may not go down as much as everyone else, but that's due to the reallocation of space amongst the users of this building.
But he didn't move at all, did he?
The engineering has some drawings and stuff stored in this building.
Okay. So it just goes down 5,400?
Based upon the space of the room that the drawings are stored in.
Okay.
And it also sounds like because the budget for maintaining the building went down as well?
We were able to, and you'll see that later on, related to the custodial services in the building.
Mr. Slaughter, anything else?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, move on to pages 14 and 15.
Administrative Streets and Parks Department. Personnel services, salaries, overtime, FICA, life insurance, workers' compensation, pensions, health insurance. Total personnel services, $578,431. Purchase of services, heat, $1,250. Tree removal, $1,500. Equipment rental, $500. Brandon Park electric bills, $3,000. Ways Garden electric bills, $350. Bowman Field electric bills, $5,000. Memorial Park electric bills, $700. Young's Woods electric bills, $1,000. Water and sewer, $1,900. Shade Tree Commission, nothing. Ways Garden Commission, $1,000. Festival of Lights, $2,400.
Go ahead and roll through the next page as well.
Gas and oil vehicles, $14,500. Protective clothing, $1,800. Other parks materials, $15,000. New trees, flowers, shrubs, $1,000. Brandon Park tree maintenance, $900. Equipment, $37,000. Equipment repairs, vehicle repairs, $6,000. Repairs to other equipment, $9,000. Other expenditures, Bowman Field improvements, $20,000. For a total department expense, $702,231.
Thank you. Questions on page 14 and 15? Mr. Anderson.
Would you mind explaining the Ways Garden Commission, Shade Tree Commission, and then also just a question, do we have a fund for Brandon Park Commission? And how does that all play together?
Brandon Park and Shade Tree are one and the same commission.
Okay,
I'm not sure why we don't have a fund for them, but,
but there is zero there.
yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I know Brandon Park gets a lot of donations, and money is generated, through the commission for different items. The entrance of Brandon Park was a huge donation.
Do we have any kind of accounting of those donations and expenditures? I mean, does that
Yes,
come?
everything for Brandon Park goes through my office. They don't actually, Ways Garden controls their own money. The city controls the money for the Brandon Park Commission.
Okay. So that's just all kind of sprinkled through your whole budget? Is that, I'm just wondering how that
They have
works.
their own, what do I call it, their own account. Joe could probably explain a little
There
better.
are certain funds within the city that are obligated for certain items, so they're not showing up in the general fund. Previously, the Shade Tree Commission had an allocation towards them from the general fund budget, but I believe at one point it was turned over to the Ways Garden Commission to meet our commitments. We have to commit so much, and I don't know if you're aware of this.
Yeah, it's
specific
by the
commitments.
foundation.
But we have to commit the $1,000 per year towards the operation of that park or upkeep of that park.
Right.
But there is a separate accounting for, it's not within this general budget. It's in what we call our treasury fund, which houses many different other projects, Bowman Field Rent, the Brandon Park Commission, flood control, capital repairs. There's a number of items.
And that's called the Treasury Fund?
Yes.
And is that, do we see a reflection of that anywhere in here?
Not in this budget, no.
Okay, yeah, it's just interesting to me. That's, that's funding, projects in the city, Brandon Park, but we don't have any.
They're restricted for that specific, whatever purpose they were brought in under, donated for.
Right, I would assume that, we just don't see that.
Other areas you'll see that is for grant funds, and we have the Elm Street program.
Right.
That goes run through that method there itself.
I think it'd be helpful if taxpayers could see, an accounting of that. I know it would be helpful for me. I'm not doubting anything, but, it just, I think it's important for us to be able to see somehow. So I
thought
don't
that
know.
there was the controller's report, which used to break down those
Okay.
things, but I'll have to check to see. I don't receive those, but I can check and see what they still have that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's, I don't know that it answers the question, but it at least kind of exposes something that needs an answer. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question to follow up on that before Ms. Noviello. Could we get, or maybe, I know the finance reports used to include most of those. No, they didn't, okay. Is there a way to get a total of how much funds are in those kinds of accounts? And then what the annual revenue is total off of those kinds of accounts? right? So basically what we're talking about is endowments, essentially,
In-house,
right?
To a degree, yes.
Yeah, so, what is the size of the endowments? What is the size of the revenue and the expenditures marked against that revenue?
Perhaps that is something we can talk about in Finance Committee and come up with a solution to hopefully meet everyone's.
To get, maybe add that as a quarterly report or something like that. Mr. Novia?
That was kind of what I was going to have in mind, so I appreciate that. But to add to that, who is it that would, I don't, manipulate the funds isn't the right word, but if the Brandon Park Commission needs X amount of dollars for a specific use, even for a designated use, how does that procedure take place?
I have not been part of that process. It comes through my desk at the end. It runs through the controller's office, but I don't know how they designate. There's a board, I suspect that the board designates or approves release of specific funds.
To give you an explanation of that, Brandon Park Commission votes on something, then they give their recommendation. We'll take the front entrance to Brandon Park, for example. That was, I think, $19,000 was donated, maybe a little more. It was put out for bid to Ettinger's and a few other places. I know once the bids came in, I believe it went to Public Works last year, just for a update on where things were with the project. Ultimately, in the end, if the amount is under the threshold, the check rec is issued by my department under, I guess you would say, my decision that, yes, this is what we're going to spend the money on, following the guidelines of what it was donated for. If it exceeds the threshold where it has to go out to public bid, then it would come before council for your approval.
Okay, when you make the requisition for the check that's necessary, where does the procedure go after that?
The check rec is issued, it's turned into finance writes a check, and then basically everything gets
And I
done.
think it backtracks to the controller's office, is that correct, Joe? There's a series of signatures,
Yes.
and I think Nick has to sign off as well, right?
Yes.
So- Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that.
Follows the same procedure as any
Yeah.
general fund expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Mealy?
I'm not attacking the procedure in your office, Mr. Winder, but I am, I guess, wondering about the upper administrative procedure related to the fact that we're about to spend better than $500,000 in Brandon Park, and it would have seemed perhaps financially advantageous for the administration to choose to roll updating the front of Brandon Park into that larger project to receive some sort of an overall savings instead of moving forward with the smaller project independently. Is there any sort of procedure top-down, say, with expenditures by individual park commissions? Do they go through the mayor? Do you know what I mean? Because I guess it seems as though within your office, there's nothing particularly wrong, but it seems as though the information should have come down from above the Streets and Parks Department saying, hey, we're working on something bigger there. We'd like you to hang on to this project until we can wrap it into that project.
Right.
I take it that didn't happen. Is there any kind of procedure in place that would dictate that that should happen? That it should go to the other departments for review just in case we're working on something else in another department?
The mayor is supposed to attend the Brandon Park Commission meetings.
Okay.
I guess if he was there, he would know exactly what's going on, but I don't know his schedule, so I don't know why he doesn't make them all, or.
I never point fingers at people who don't make meetings, because I often don't make them either, but I understand. So you're saying the exchange of information may not have happened simply because if everybody isn't at the same meeting, then you don't necessarily discuss the issue. Mr. Allison, you've been trying to talk about this for a minute, sorry.
Mr. Allison?
Just to piggyback on that, and everything else has been said, I think we need to begin somewhere, maybe with the Finance Committee, to develop some policies, because regardless of what the commissions are charged with doing, whatever money they get, it's city government money. It doesn't, it may be dedicated to a specific project, but it has to come under, I think, maybe a little bit more scrutiny, at least more transparency about, and it's not your fault or anybody's fault. I think these things have just happened over the years, and this has been the easiest way to handle it. But I think we need more, let's say more control in place, so that, not because of anything particularly nefarious might be done, but as Councilwoman Mealy said, if we're going to spend a lot of dollars in Brandon Park, it should be coordinated. There should be a plan. It should all work together, not spot done here and there. So we need to begin, I think council needs to begin that work.
We need also to bear in mind that the commission is an advisory. It's not
Right.
an expenditure.
Yeah.
Well, by free will, so to speak. Not that, again, there's nothing nefarious there, but
Yeah.
it's just a matter of protocol, I think, procedure needs to be ironed out.
And part of the equation, I think there is some oversight happening, clearly. They're making, a commission is making a recommendation. You, it sounds like, have the ability to override that recommendation. Of course, you can be overridden by your boss if is so required. But then, between the Treasurer and Controller's office, the availability of the fund and its expenditure, appropriate expenditure, the administration is also being overseen. The missing piece in all of that, except for the cases where the budget exceeds the required amount, is that there is no role currently in the process for legislative oversight, us. And the reason that might be important, not to some degree for all of those same reasons, but one additional reason is to the degree that funding that would be spent on maintenance of, say, Brandon Park through a dedicated fund is known by us versus unknown by us, it might change our willingness to allocate or not allocate general fund budget for the same or similar purposes. So, for example, if we knew that there was a fund out, and there is no way for us to know right now, if we knew that there was a fund providing $10,000 for daffodils in Brandon Park each year, we might be less willing ourselves, who knows, we may be more willing, to fund additional daffodils out of the general fund dollars, but because we don't see the full picture of daffodil expenditures, we're constrained in the ability to make informed decisions. And so I think having a procedure where either through regular reporting or showing those funds as a revenue and an expenditure through the budget, one way or the other, then we can make better informed decisions about those relatively narrow areas, I'm assuming, where these special funds are set up. Ms. Mealy.
I also think we need to remember that we hope, of course, that people in the city will choose to enact their legacy by giving funds to some part of the city that they care about. Part of people choosing to do that is feeling as though we are both being transparent and getting the best, utilizing those funds in the best way possible. We would never want someone to feel as though they didn't know where this money that they'd given to the city for specific care of something that was important to them had gone. And so I think that becomes another reason that we need to follow up on that. The other specific reason in the case of Brandon Park is that I suspect, I know that we need matching funds against some of the grant sources that we'll be using in Brandon Park. And so, of course, any amount of money that we are expending in Brandon Park should be tallied as a potential match to grant funds that we're hoping to either hoping to receive or have received for new developments in the park. All that said, Mr. Pavlak, when should I put when can you provide a summary of obligated funds to the Finance Committee? Okay. Does the rest of council feel comfortable with that? Okay. If we could look at it the second meeting in the new year, because I know that I won't be present for the first meeting, that'd be great. Okay.
Other comments then for page 14 and 15? I'm sorry,
Just-
Mr. Slaughter.
Will that report include the treasury fund, all the different? Right. That's what.
Yeah,
okay.
that's what she's
Right.
asking
Yep,
about.
that's what, okay.
Yep.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
No other questions on pages 14 and 15, pages 16 and 17 then?
Streets and Parks, Streets Department Traffic Control. Personnel Services, salaries, overtime, FICA, life insurance, workers' compensation, pension, healthcare. Total personnel services, $1,766,206. Purchase of services, water and sewer, $1,400. Light and power, $15,000. Street lighting, $62,000. Heat, $8,500. Beltway lighting, $7,000. Trash removal, $45,000. Contract services, $40,000. Recycle program, $20,000. Gas, supplies and materials, gas and oil vehicles, $51,000. Protective clothing, $6,000. Supplies and materials, $15,000. Storm sewer materials, $7,000. Other expenditures, paint, traffic, $15,000. Traffic controls, $13,000. Hand tools, $300. Vehicle repairs, $6,500. Traffic signal repairs, $8,000. Other equipment repairs, $800. Facility maintenance, $30,000. Bowman Field maintenance, $25,000. Repairs to radios, $7,500. Street resurfacing, reconstruction, $100,000. Brick Street resurfacing, reconstruction, $50,000. Street resurfacing, county liquid fuels, $23,543. Equipment, $30,000. Total department expenses, $2,353,749.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Novio?
On the equipment line, Adam, I'm assuming that the 64,000 jump there is for a piece of equipment that we picked up?
If you remember November of last year, council approved the purchase of a lift, a vehicle lift for the mechanics. We ordered that, you guys approved at the end of November, ordered it right after Thanksgiving. It wasn't installed till early January, so that's why that's rolled into this year and shows under this year.
Ms. Mealy?
Yeah, just a quick question about the decrease in contract services, and since that was such a loaded concept in the last, in the last round of your budget that we saw. What's going on with these contract services? What are they specific to?
Okay, this contract services is for the MS4. Water Authority's our coordinator for the MS4 project. And last year, we boosted it up under the assumption that we were going to be paying a stormwater fee. So now we've kind of dropped it back down since the stormwater fee has not come through yet.
Okay, so that was to cover stormwater fees for the street, for our
It'd
parks
be
and
the
streets.
Streets and
et cetera,
Parks
et cetera.
Department.
Got it. We didn't build that in anywhere else in the budget, I don't think, although I think it would have applied to all of us. But anyway, it was good thinking on our part there. The recycling program, why is it increasing in cost for us?
Because of, like, this year, I technically need to grind right now that the brush
The
pile.
mulch pile, got it.
And it's, you know, with the Lycoming County closing, and now we're using Wayne Township landfill, increasing costs. The way the storms have been coming through, just trying to prepare for next year a little better than we did this year.
Got it, okay. And trash removal, we're just anticipating the cost of the contract going up this year.
Trash removal, because of the MS4 also, we're gonna have to start dumping our sweeper dumps and logging what we dump properly in order to gain the
Yeah, I didn't.
credits for
Jeez.
that.
This MS4, man. All right. And then, I don't know if this is a question for you so much, Mr. Winder, as it is for finance, but Bowman Field, Mr. Nichols and Mr. Winder, can we talk about Bowman Field, our potential RAC Peak grant there, and how that's going to impact our need for Bowman Field funds? If we have, I think, 45,000 budgeted in this year's budget.
I can discuss that more in detail in the capital projects budget, if that's
Got it.
okay.
I mean, it is, I guess what I'm asking is, do we have that budgeted somewhere, or have we not yet? Okay, all right. I haven't reviewed the capital project schedule, excuse me, so I will be looking at it with you. Okay, and I believe that's everything that's everything I have.
All righty, Mr. Slaughter.
Yeah, I just have, going back to the equipment, you said the lift rolled over to 2018, but the 2017 actual says 30,000. So,
2018 actual.
In 17, there were other expenditures, or under other expenditure categories that there were savings that covered that cost. We've encumbered that in the 2017 audit to cover that cost that's showing in the 2018 actual estimate.
so we did spend all of the $30,000 in 2017 then?
2017, we tucked away the overage here to cover the cost of the lift that was approved at the end of 17, but not installed until the beginning of 18.
So the 2017 actual then wasn't 30,000?
It was, because that was for a different piece of equipment in
Originally, it was going to be
2017.
for a roller.
When we came up with a plan in 2018, when the lift was improved at the end of the year to find savings in other accounts, which was then encumbered or tucked away for the expense that would be paid in 2018. So it won't, it's washing between 2 years.
I get that, but, so,
There was 30,000 budgeted, 30,000 spent, but there would have been 60,000 spent in
Correct.
2017's budget, but it ended up being spent in 2018 instead.
In the savings, it was from savings in other accounts.
Right. Oh,
Through transfers?
hang on. 32,000 was spent on a lift,
in
which was
in 18.
budgeted in 17, but the money, the lift didn't get installed till 2018.
Right.
This year, council approved a $31,664 pavement roller that was budgeted in 2018 and purchased in 2018.
So
Does that make better sense?
That's 64,000, I get that, but there's still 30,000, I feel like, somewhere.
The 30,000, I think, that you're looking for, there was $30,000 budgeted in the end of 16 for 2017. That was expended on something that, who knows what, except for Mr. Winder. But then the goal was to actually exceed that budget in 2017 by $30,000 because there was money saved in other places in the budget that would have showed up in a transfer, but because that never happened in 2018, the transfers didn't occur, and that's why we see a $64,000 expenditure in 2018 when the idea and commitment actually came out of the 2017 budget. Does that capture?
And the money's hanging in the 2017 budget to cover the overage for 2018.
And it didn't follow the bottom line, you encumbered it as one of that.
Correct.
There's a pie chart in the, is that in the audit, that shows the encumbered versus, there's encumbered, restricted versus encumbered, which, as far as I could ever tell, is if the administration did it, it's one thing, if the council committed the funds, it was the other, more or less.
So
It's
we-
very accountingly confused
Right, so really, we spent $94,000.
over 2 years.
Right, because you
Yeah.
spent the 30 in 17 and 64 this year.
Right.
So really, it was 94,000.
Right.
Due to the emergency need for the
So it-
lift in 2017.
Right. So it did go over 34,000, right? Okay. But that, okay. So the 30,000 in 17, that was the actual, was spent on whatever else that was,
Another set of things that,
whatever that
yeah,
could be, of equipment.
right.
$30,000 of some type of equipment.
No. No, that's what I'm trying to say. Everybody's getting a little confused. The $30,000 in 2017 was never spent. That's why at the end of the year, under the direction of Bill Wright coming in and helping me look at the budget, I came in and said that there was this lift that we needed that was at a cost of $32,000. The money was left in 2017. It was not spent under the equipment line item. But because of the delay in having the lift installed, that's why it rolled over to 2018.
So to go back to Mr. Slaughter's question, over 2 years, did we spend
We spent
$64,000
$64,000
over
of
2 years? or-
leftover money from 2017 into 2018 with the purchase of the roller this year. So,
And nothing was spent therefore in 2017?
correct.
So the actual for 2017 should be 0.
In a different budget than you're looking at?
Okay.
So either it was spent
Yeah.
or it wasn't spent.
Regardless of what was done, it would have rolled to the bottom line with the actual numbers, because remember, these are actual estimates. So if we did not spend that 30 and did not encumber it, it would just roll to the bottom.
But you just said it was.
I need to look at it because I'm under a different assumption than.
So one possibility is the one I described
Right.
before. The other possibility is, as of Thanksgiving 2017,
Yes.
the idea was, we're going to buy a lift. And council approved the lift. So it was an actual, we assumed we were going to spend it. But by the time the audit for 2017 came out, that would have been zeroed out. And then the actual of that money committed in the fall of 2017 came out of 2018. That's the version you've described.
Right.
Which of those is true,
The-
we have to figure out.
It may help you remember. The money was budgeted in 2017 for a roller, and I believe, Ms. Mealy, when I presented to finance for the lift, you questioned what happened to the roller.
Yes. Well, I think we were
And that's when we
talking
talked-
about a roller,
Yeah.
and then you said you could wait on the roller because
Yes.
the lift was much more
So just,
necessary item.
yeah.
So we just need to figure out what happened to that $30,000, basically.
And that, I mean, part of the issue, of course, is laying plans November, the administration's putting it at the beginning, finalizing plans at the beginning and middle of November, and then we get a printout third week in November, and then you have 5 weeks later in which all of that can change fairly considerably, depending on, a lift breaking or something. Anything else on these?
No, so we'll get clarification on that then.
Good. Any other questions, Mr. Henderson?
I don't know if I missed it, but back on page 15, the equipment line item there for 37,000, did I miss the explanation on that, or could you?
I don't think anybody asked, but I'll give you one. What I did there was last year, or this year, in the 2017 budget, we put in $40,000 for a flood control tractor. What I did was I shifted that from that line item, because we purchased that tractor, over to Parks Department to alternate out which department gets equipment throughout the budget season. The Parks Department currently has a 2004, it's called a Hustler 3500 series mower. It does mowing, leaf pickup, snow removal. It's a adverse piece of equipment. At this point, getting very hard to find parts for. They no longer make them. And of course, it's getting aged and worn out. So therefore, for 2018, we put $37,000 in to purchase a new mowing piece of equipment that will also do snow removal and leaf pickup, et cetera.
All right, and that came from, you said that you moved that from where?
Yeah, if you look at the 2017 budget, or the 2018, I'm sorry, the money spent in 2018 under flood control, which we'll make it there real soon, we allocated $40,000 under their equipment line item, which will now
Yeah.
show zero for
Okay.
the 2019 budget.
Right, for the hillside mower.
Yes.
Okay, yep. I think that, okay, now I see it, now I see it. So on page 18, which I don't think we've gotten to yet,
Nope.
it's a big goose egg right there. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Novio?
Adam, we've had some discussions in the past about the excess materials that's laid off in our recycling center. And we have to haul that away each and every week just about. Is that cost built into the trash removal figure
Yes.
here?
Yes.
Can you give me some kind of just a ballpark figure on that?
If I had to guess, we're probably somewhere around $100 a month.
$100 a month, 12 times a year?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Slaughter?
Just one follow-up. We would have check recs or whatever for that, once we're verifying that 30,000, right? Okay, so we could
Yeah.
potentially cross-reference to see if it was spent or not?
Yep.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
And this set of questions or ideas is not really directed at you, it just fits tonight for you. And bear with me, I want to go a couple steps deeper than just the basic version of the question. So on page 14, of course, we have personnel for parks, and on page 16, we have personnel for streets. And specifically, I just want to look at the pension and healthcare numbers there. And of course, as we talked about earlier tonight, the pension numbers are increased in both cases because, not because you hired more people, not because of any changes or management decisions you've made in your department at all, but simply because our minimum municipal obligation is calculated under a formula had changed. And so those two went up. And then health insurance, those, one isn't changing much. The other one is changing by about $46,000. And that is a function of probably different life circumstances and members of each of those departments on the one hand, but also, is it a 7% increase in healthcare costs? So if I add up the differences between actual estimate 2018 and proposed 2019 across those four line items, it works out to about $220,000 growth in your budget that you couldn't do anything about, right?
Correct.
Right. How many employees in terms of salary and benefit does $220,000 cover?
24.
And you're,
24 in my.
no, I'm sorry. If you had $220,000 and I gave it to you and none of your costs grew, how many people would you, more or less, would you be able to hire? 3 or 4? 3 maybe?
Yeah.
3? And so that your budget is going up by $220,000 over things you can't stop, that you can't control, that you can't constrain, so that you can do other things like update old equipment, hire additional staff, put in better beltway lighting or trash removal or recycling program or more lights for the Festival of Lights or trees, flowers, and shrubs, is partially because $220,000 out of about $3 million of growth in your expenses that you have no ability to stop, right? And if we wanted, across those two budgets, your one is going up by about $90,000, the other one is going up by about $200,000, so we'll call it $300,000 across those two budgets. 200 and, what'd I say, 20?
$220,000, yes.
out of the $300,000 is simply because of healthcare costs and pension costs that you can't control.
Correct.
So if I were coming to you and I said, this winter, it's a bad budget year. I need you to hold your budget at flat, 0% increase. But by the way, you can't stop the $220,000 increase in pension and healthcare costs. What then goes through your mind?
First thing is I cut the assistant general manager.
So you lay off somebody.
Well, I wouldn't hire the person I'm
You
missing.
wouldn't hire, there'd be fewer members of your department.
Right.
Because out of your $3 million budget across the two departments, 578 plus one, what is that? 2.3 million of the 2.3 of the $3 million that you oversee are personnel.
Right.
So to say $200,000, there's not $200,000 to save other than in people, correct?
Well, I guess the first place I would cut is the assistant general manager, which I
Okay.
don't have now.
Okay,
The second part would be the general fund street reconstruction project. Honestly, I can make it up in liquid fuels.
Okay.
Which is not tax-based.
so, but so far, the two solutions are employ fewer people and don't pave as many streets.
Well, I'm not saying don't pave as many.
Well, but you, I mean, there are $100,000 here
Right, but
allocated here.
see-
You'd have less, not more.
Well, I'm not losing any because our liquid fuels went up.
Okay, sure,
So-
compared to the year before, but compared to your current plan, you would be.
It doesn't show it on my current plan right now.
Oh, the liquid fuels
The
isn't.
liquid fuels will show that it went up a little bit, but it doesn't show where it's exactly allocated.
Oh, okay, I see.
So at this point, nobody would know
Right.
without me telling you. The next
but-
thing is try to nurse the equipment as long as we can. I mean, I'll be honest, this last snowstorm, we had 6 trucks break down. But.
Out
that's
of
why
how
I'm-
many?
Out of 18 plow trucks.
A third of your fleet broke down in one 8-inch snowstorm, 10-inch.
Because you're talking about trucks that are 1996 to 2000, aged, salt's killing them. That's why we're slowly working on a plan to, every couple of years, re-up a few vehicles.
Sure.
If we can get on a plan that every 10 years we're turning over our oldest vehicle, we're doing a lot better.
Right. I'm not trying to get you to solve all the problems
No,
of the
no, no,
city
I
right now.
understand.
What I'm trying to illustrate is the big problem that we all face, right? You have costs that go up that you can't control, and so does every department in the city. We have revenue that we were arguing earlier about whether we should expect revenue to go up on its own by 2%. And here I'm talking about 7-8% of your budget that you can't control it growing. And the alternative, which unfortunately it has a real chance of becoming reality, is we're doing, and again, you're here. I'm only talking to you because you're here. You could have this exact same conversation with every department. The only other alternative is we have fewer workers, either through attrition, as you just suggested, or through layoffs. We punt to the future. In other words, we make somebody else somewhere down the road pay for something that we should have paid for now. Or what was the third one? All bad things. Or we have deteriorating infrastructure. That was the third one.
But now, if you cut back on the manpower, at the same time, people understand you cut back on services they receive.
Exactly.
So-
Do you want to wait
Let's
12
just-
hours instead of 4 hours for your plowing?
Right. I mean, let's be honest, 8 inches of snow, 18 guys, 34 to 36 hours straight, we're nothing like PennDOT where you're 10 on, 10 off. So we don't have the manpower to cycle in and relieve a guy. Once they get burned out, they're done. They just go home. So if every street's not plowed because we have a 3 or 4 day storm, not every street's plowed.
Right.
I mean, we can't make them stay. At that point, they're unsafe.
Right.
So if we drop below the current 26 guys, chances are we're not going to get many streets plowed because I can't cycle guys in and out. I've got 18 trucks that are full right from the heaviest point of the storm, so that only leaves me 8 guys. If we drop a few guys off and we're down to, just say, 22, 23, that gives you 5 guys to cycle in after guys have been in for 18, 24, 30 hours straight. Doesn't leave you very much.
Right, and I'm just taking this big picture pause here.
Right.
Because, not because you're here and I want this, any of these outcomes to affect your department, but we're to the point where we've played all of the moves we can play in the game.
Right.
In a really serious, important game. And now we have to make the choices. Do we, where do taxes go? That's clearly always a part of the issue. Do we have fewer people to run the equipment? Do we have older equipment and/or do we have older infrastructure? Or do we create legacy costs for the future by not maintaining the equipment that we have properly? I mean, I don't see other choices.
Right. The last one I don't think should be an option. I mean, to keep pushing it off, unfortunately, I believe that's how I got to where I am with the streets department.
Agreed.
It got pushed off and pushed off and pushed off, so now this year we've bought an excessive amount of equipment, but thankfully we did it with liquid fuels. So
Right.
it's not general fund money as a burden on the taxpayer. I mean, you still pay gas tax, but that's inevitable.
Right.
So like I said, I think that's how I got to where we are, and I wouldn't want to push that off any further because somebody's going to be stuck, have to figure out how to buy, let's just say, 10 trucks at one time soon.
Right. And so, let me throw out 2 other ideas and then I'll finally stop. I'm enjoying yours and my conversation, even if it is about really tough problems that we face. The other 2 options, of course, we're, as was referenced earlier, we're working on economic development as hard as fast as we can. We all are. But even in the best of times that Mr. Grimes referred to, 6, 8 years ago, economic growth only resulted in a couple $300,000 a year of growing revenue. That would cover your uncontrollable growth and costs, just yours, just an 1/8 of the total budget or so. So that's one other area that we can use. The other one then is, do you want to take this medicine or do you want to take that medicine? And so at some point, someone has to decide, and of course the mayor's made some decisions in his proposed budget, council has its decisions to make. Where does the pain hurt the least? And we've got, all of our departments are important departments, doing things that the taxpayers value. Our streets are important, our parks are important, our police force and our fire department and our codes, our finance, our record, all of those things are important. And so then the question is, where? That, I think, is ultimately the burden that we signed up for. Whether we like it or not, is making that kind of tough set of decisions. So thank you for putting up with me using your department as the illustration, but by no means do I mean to target your department in the discussion. It's the whole city's problem that we're facing right now. Are there any further comments on page 16 or 17? Thank you. Page 18.
Public services, flood control, personnel services, salaries, overtime, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, health insurance, total Personnel Services, $222,504. Purchase of services, water and sewer, $125. Light and power, $37,000. Heat, $16,000. Supplies and materials, gas and oil vehicles, $6,000. Protective clothing, $900. Flood control materials, $20,000. Departmental equipment, 0. Vehicle repairs, $3,000. Other equipment repairs, $11,000. Flood levy certification, $100,000. Total department expenses, $416,529.
Questions? It's a record.
Nope, sorry.
Ms. Mealy.
It was about to be a record. No, I was merely concerned about a lack of equipment in the public services flood control budget. I appreciate it because it makes this year's budget that much easier, but it does seem as though it will make next year's budget that much harder, because presumably you can't go 2 years without needing some kind of equipment, correct?
If, my plan is to cycle vehicles from streets department as far as, when I say equipment, I'm talking trucks, things of that nature. As far as tractors, once we purchase this new mower for the Parks Department, flood control and Parks Department is sitting pretty good for a few years on tractors. I'm not going to say we'll go 10 years, but if we started a plan going into 2020 of saying we want to allocate X amount of money over the next, 4 years to purchase a tractor, we're going to be a lot better off. As far as trucks, if I can cycle trucks out of the streets department as we purchase new ones there so that, they'll, parks and flood control will gain a newer truck faster that way. And we use liquid fuels money to keep rotating into the streets department budget, because any used liquid fuels money for has to be used to purchase something that involves streets, whether it's street lighting, street paving, plowing snow, etc. So that kind of helps so that we're not putting such a burden on the general fund. Hopefully that helps answer your question.
Thank you.
One thing that I was going to say on the previous page is positive news, by the way. I added up all the sources of street resurfacing funds across the various budgets, ranging from general fund to liquid fuels to Act 13 funds to CDBG. And I do add it up, if I've got this correctly, to 987,000 across those numbers. And so that's a healthy number after a very healthy year that, assuming we don't have to cut some of that over the next couple of weeks, means that we should continue to make good progress. Yes. That we were all worried we wouldn't make at the beginning of this year that we now have, except for you, PennDOT, hurry up. But that's, we can all blame them for being slow in their planning processes. But for the city streets, we've made real progress this year, and I think nearly $1 million will help us stay on that right path if we can afford it. Yes. We'll see after the next couple of weeks. Look at that. Your 45 minutes only took an hour and 15. All right, thank you very much. Next pages are 41 and various.
See, I get extended time.
Oh, you're
fuels.
sticking with us. Okay.
Liquid fuels is for me.
All right.
Yeah. Projected revenues, liquid fuels, 938,297. Interest, $3,600. Surplus appropriated, budget only, $60,000. Total projected revenue, $1,001,897. Projected expenditures, salt and cinders, $70,000. Street materials, $80,000. Street resurface, construction, $304,397. Beltway light maintenance, $1,000. Storm sewers and drains, $20,000. Equipment purchases, $145,000. Hand tools, $1,500. Light and power, street, $275,000. Traffic light and power, $30,000. Repairs to vehicles, $75,000. Total projected expenditures, $1,001,897.
Okay, questions? Hearing none. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next pages are 37, 38, capital fund budget, capital projects budget, excuse me. Mr. Nichols is rested up and ready for round two.
Oops. Okay, we're on page 37?
Yes.
Okay. Projected revenues for the 2019 capital projects budget, transfer from debt service, $1,200,000. To clarify, that's sort of a carryover since the projects weren't implemented in 2018. That $1,200,000 includes City Hall and the levy project, as well as an allocation for Bowman Field. Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, again, the grants we have for Ways Garden and Brandon Park, $340,000. Transfer from Bowman Field, $200,000. Then there's a transfer utility fund, $100,000. That's for Bowman Field. RACP, $600,000. That's the recently announced RACP grant that we were fortunate to get for the last phase of the Bowman Field project. Crosscutters, private donation of $100,000 towards the Bowman Field project. Pathways to Health TAP grant, which is a transportation alternative program, $798,500. Again, a carryover from implementation this year. Undetermined Army Corps of Engineers, $750,000. Really, that's most of that needs to be determined. We, again, I guess the best update I can give you is that, as you know, we tried to break down the levee project in phases, and the relief wells was the first phase that was identified as part of the SWIFT plan. And we were fortunate to get a RACP grant for $1 million from Senator Yaw towards that project. That's being handled by the county. As I understand it, I think that's a $2,250,000, so Southside is involved in that. So essentially, in terms of how the RACP grant is allocated, most of that $750,000 could come from that RACP grant. So that's the part of the entire project. East 3rd Street, we have in the other budget, so total projected revenue is $4,088,500.
Go ahead and do both pages, be fine.
Let me keep going?
Yeah.
All right, expense side, Bowman Field, $1,250,000. Again, a RACP grant will be part of that, approximately 50% of that project. As I said, this project completes it was a 4-phase project, if you recall, that was presented by Tony Visco some years ago. That was part of negotiations with the crosscutters. This would include a new scoreboard, renovations to the locker rooms, the umpire locker room. It would also a new pump house, which is desperately needed. And I think that's most of that project. This would guarantee another 4 years of the crosscutters, well into 2000, I think 24, 25. And again, the challenge is the matching money for that particular project. But first, the City Hall Fire Headquarters Improvement Project, $450,000. Brandon Park, $250,000. Ways Guard, $90,000. And levee improvements, $1,250,000, which again is the Phase 1 project that's identified in the SWIFT plan of relief wells. And then the Pathway to Health, $798,500 for $4,088,500. So breaking down the Bowman Field project, if you look at the revenue side of it, with the donation from the cross gutters of $100,000, the utility fund $100,000, the Bowman Field account we've been able to save up because of the relationship with MLB and very few expenses because they've picked up all the maintenance and the ongoing care for the last couple of years and going forward another year. So that brings down to coming up with a balance of $250,000. Depending on negotiations with Water Authority or other revenue sources, last resort would be some sort of a borrowing for $250,000, but the additional fees that would be generated from Bowman Field and the new amenities and the new lease with the cross gutters, we wanted to come down to a number that could be self-sufficient in terms of revenue generated from Bowman Field, and so there'd be no impact to the general fund. So that's why you see various sources to match the RACB fund. So at the most, the $250,000 would be carried by fees from Bowman Field and not from the general fund. So we think we have a good plan to get that project going. We'd like to have it completed before the next season, and as well as bring a new lease to City Council for the cross gutters that would take us another 4 years on top of what we have already. That's it.
All right, questions on the capital projects fund? Ms. Mealy?
Obviously, we need to have some kind of intense discussions about our plan for the Bowman Field funds here moving forward. Otherwise, just so I completely understand, the transfer from debt service, 1.2 million, is 500,000 of money for the levy. Do we still have 500,000 in that?
Yes,
Okay. 450 is what remains of the funding for City Hall?
Correct.
And then that's 250
correct.
that you're picturing, and which, I apologize if I've zoned out for a second, which portion of debt service are you picturing covering that 250 for Bowman, or that's not?
Fees from Bowman Field, the renegotiation of the new lease, advertising on the scoreboard.
We're showing it as a transfer from debt service, but we're not, or that wasn't where the funding was coming from. Perhaps I misinterpreted.
Well,
that.
it's because the.
New debt.
It came originally from the bonds, so it's just being moved over to a new year because those projects weren't implemented.
Didn't we spend the money that we borrowed for Bowman out of the bonds?
You're anticipating, unless other funds can be created, an additional borrowing of $250,000 for Bowman?
Unless other funds, right. We've identified the other 350, which leaves a balance of 250, which fees could carry that debt service. It's about $20,000 a year, approximately. But there's an ongoing negotiation with the Water Authority, the pump station sale, I don't know, there's
I mean,
be
but just
dollars
help me
there.
to understand here quick with Bowman. We'd be looking at presumably a 20-year borrowing, right? If we were,
As, depending on an estimate of calculation of just what fees or additional revenues we could generate from Bowman Field would probably dictate the term. The fewer the years, the better. I mean, the shorter the term, the better.
I guess my curiosity is simply that if we're looking at a potential contract extension of 4 years with the crosscutters, but we're hoping to recognize an additional income of $200,000 that we'll be borrowing up front to amortize out over a period of time with fees to them, but we don't have any guarantee that they'll be there for that length of time.
Well, I think you're-
That's my concern.
Yeah, I think you're reading my mind that just budgeting additional $50,000 a year for 5 years, to match any kind of extension of the crosscutters probably would be a better situation.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would appreciate having a better
I agree with-
understanding of that project concept before we authorize
Yeah,
it.
the more I thought about it, I think you're right, that would be a better way to do it, to match the extension of the Crosscutters lease, as well as, any additional improvements. Lease we negotiated a couple times ago included that their fee would increase by so much per every 100,000 we put into Bowman Field. So I think you're right. That would be the best way to do it, is just budget so much money equal to the extension of the lease agreement.
Well, I look forward to that as an ongoing discussion. And hopefully we can arrive at something that we're all comfortable with fiscally.
If the MLB stays, well, that's for that amount of time, then it would be no problem, because, they would be a source of revenue as well.
Well, I would like to see Bowman Field be a source of revenue for us, period, but not simply to match our expenditures on it, but perhaps to actually increase, generate some level of income for the city.
Well, that was
over and
one thing,
above.
creative enterprises we talked about in the plan, more utilization of Bowman Field for various events.
Yeah, anyway, all right, I think that's all the questions I have, thank you.
Okay, any further on the capital projects fund? Hearing none, Act 13 fund?
Act 13, Act 13, page 43. This year, we received approximately $500,000, and being conservative, we budget $450,000 and allocate the funds the same way we did in 2018. Money towards the flood levy certification, street resurfacing, $105,000, general obligation bonds, $200,000, Graffus Run flood mitigation, $45,000, for a total of $450,000.
Questions? Hearing none. Debt service fund.
Debt service. That's page 42, proceeds from the issuance of borrowing proceeds, zero. Transfer from general fund, which is the amount in the transfer on the equity sheet, $608,750. Transfer from other funds, that goes towards debt service, such as liquid fuels, Bowman Field, other fees. Transfer from Act 13, $100,000, $861,250. Expenditures, transfer to capital projects. Again, we're just, since those projects were not initiated, we're moving the $950 into the new year, 2019. And then the debt service breaks down in 2019 as $462,550 for debt and interest of $398,700 for a total of $1,811,250.
Just question on making sure I'm following all the money. First, on the revenues versus expenditures, don't we usually have those match up even if it's a carryover?
Well, it would if.
It's the
Not really.
950 that's missing on the revenue side.
But that money was recognized in a prior year. We don't have to draw that money down. It was drawn down when we refinanced the bonds.
Okay, so we wouldn't want to show it as a inter-year transfer or something like that?
It's already sitting in debt service currently.
Oh, it is,
So we just
okay.
have to get it out of debt service over to the capital projects to.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got it. And then the other part goes back to what we were looking at capital projects. You're showing a transfer from debt service of $1.2 million, but you're only booking the $950,000. Should on the debt service number show a new revenue for the $250? So that
300, no, never mind, it's 250.
250, and then the
1,200.
transfer of 1.2 out? Yeah, okay. Does that, yeah, can we just get an updated page then?
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
I agree, yeah.
Just
That makes, yes, that makes.
anytime we can, for
No, that-
posterity's sake, make sure we see where money's coming and going. As we can see, my stack of these binders is now that wide, so I do go back to the old ones sometimes. Other questions on the debt service fund? Ms. Mealy?
Just a quick reminder, transfer from other funds comes from where?
Liquid fuels, that dates back to the purchase of streetlights. So we do have an allocation from liquid fuels to debt service.
Got it.
And Bowman Field, we transfer some money, and I am not sure, Joe, what else is in there? What's that? Oh, I think that's primarily it. Is that- Yeah.
Everything?
Well, actually, I guess just a question for debt service DST on application of funds, the 77,500. I'm just trying to make the numbers match up. I'm assuming capital projects, debt service, and debt service 2016 note are that 608,750. So that's
DST
77,500.
is downtown 2014, that was
Destination
related to the
2014.
arena.
Right. I guess, where does that number fall in the debt service budget?
The 77.5?
Yeah, the 77.5.
I'm sorry, which one?
On the comparative equity statement, there's a
Yes.
debt service DST that's
Right.
77.5.
The other two debt service items total out to 608,750.
Yeah.
But then there's a 77.5.
That's part of the debt service I pay, because it was remember, we were one that got the grant and did some of the work on Destination
Paid
2014.
out of RVT.
Okay,
It was part of our debt service.
but showing up as a city debt,
What's that?
but showing up on the comparative equity statement as a city debt.
Well, no, that's part of RVT's total debt.
Is it possible that that 77.5 is part of the 152.5 of other funds?
I'm looking at page 1,
Yeah,
and there's a DST debt service that's showing up on the city's application of funds.
I think that's part of our total, I'll break that down for sure with Joe, but I think that's part of our total debt, because it's part of the downtown project and the arena.
So
I don't know if you remember the
in
one
that
that we
case,
did,
we've got an
we
extra
did the bonds,
77,000
some
in the
of
bottom
it,
line.
there were totals and have split up, and I think that, if you remember, the Lot E was redone, and I think that was part of that. I can get with Joe.
That's terrific. If that's the case, then
No,
I'm
I can-
delighted. But it's still showing up as something that's being debited from the city's bottom line. So I'm just.
Well, I think if you had both debt numbers, it should come up to all those. I'll check it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if I add up all the debt numbers, it's definitely not coming up to that 861,250.
But you got to add in my debt of
Yeah.
RVT, there's a debt number in my budget as
Oh,
well,
yeah, okay, all right, let me look here.
of 600 and something.
Hang on, Bill, I'm sorry, would you take me back there real quick? Where's the debt number in your budget? I know we were just there earlier tonight, but the numbers are starting to swirl a bit.
Page,
Debt service.
page,
Okay, page 7 in RVT's budget.
Yes.
Line item 79560,
right, 600,000.
600,000.
Right.
Okay, well, that's gonna put me way over the number that's on page 40. Or,
Well, again, there's,
I'm just trying to figure out what, or 42.
but there's the,
I'm happy to yield the floor to anybody who might be able to clarify for me exactly what. the
well, I think if you had the 608 something, that's what you come up. Well, I'll
I'm
check out with
looking-
Joe.
I'm looking at an $861,000 revenue in the debt service budget for 2019.
Okay,
Then we've got the transfer to capital projects, which I'm nixing out for an $861,000 expense. Your budget shows $600,000 worth of debt
Right.
service expense. The city's budget shows basically $685,000 worth of debt service expense. So that's better than 1.2 million in debt service,
sounds about right.
but a total budget of 861,000.
You're talking about, mine doesn't show in the cities.
Okay, well then, where's the remaining 180,000? going
For-
from the city's debt service budget. I'm sorry, perhaps I'm just being totally obtuse right now, because
So
the numbers do
let-
start to swim.
Let me
I'm
see if
confused.
I follow what you're asking, Ms. Mealy. So on page 42,
Okay.
expenditures totaling $861,250 of payment of
Revenue
debt
totaling
services.
861.
Well, it's also
Expenditures,
expenditures.
right, will also.
It's the
right,
same,
once
I
you-
just
yeah.
added it up, make sure. But in terms of actually paying for the funds, what you're saying is there's 550 plus 77, so that's 627, 750, 620, 685. So 685.
686,250 is what it is.
Right, 686,250 is being paid out on the comparative equity statement, but in the debt service budget, it's 861.
Right.
So just trying to
And-
match up.
Right,
Why are those different?
and then Mr. Nichols is telling me that the 77.5 is actually part of RBT's $600,000.
Well, there's
budget.
also the 58,500. I mean, I don't.
No, all of that total together.
Page one is
The
too low
550, the
compared to
77,
page
and the
42.
58.
Not too high, too low.
But mine's not in there.
But if we do put yours in there, then it's 1.2 million, and that is way too high.
Not for both. That's, you gotta, mine's separate. It's not shown in the equity statement.
I know it's not shown in the equity statement. Is it shown in the debt service budget?
No,
Okay, so then why should the debt service budget not match the equity statement?
because my budget's separate. My budget
Yeah,
does not
yeah.
show in the equity.
Yeah, no, but it's not shown in either one she's asking about, so it's not relevant to
Because
the,
I have my own debt service number.
We're not asking about your debt service
right.
number.
Go, ignore RVT for a second.
Right.
Page 1, debt service, and page 42, debt service should match, correct?
No,
Why?
Or not?
those will transfer, I'll have to, mine is separate, it's not shown on the equity.
It's not shown on the equity, but it is shown in the debt service budget?
No,
If it's shown in neither, why are we talking about it?
I don't know why we're talking about it.
Okay, so Joe,
The only reason we would need to talk about yours is if you were supposed to be paying the debt service DST that's shown on the equity statement.
No,
Joe's doing math. Let's let Joe do some math.
that's not my, no, that's not, we separated that out. The arena was separated out, show it
But it's on the equity statement.
Hold on,
on the
both of you.
equity, yes.
Bill, Liz, second.
okay,
Joe is working on it, and he says, I think I heard him say, let me figure it out and I'll get back to you on Wednesday. But theoretically, is Liz right? Those numbers should match up?
No,
No.
one's 686 and one's 861.
Yeah.
I don't think there's transposition there. The numbers just don't match up.
Right.
I mean, that 608,000 is identical to the 2016 note debt service and the capital projects debt service. Then we've got that 77.5 hanging out there, which would appear to be matched by both the 152.5 and 100,000.
Okay, so just help us, you know what we're asking then, you're clear on that. All right,
Well, but there is this very small secondary question of, is Bill, like he claims, paying the Destination 2014 debt service out of RBT, and if so, why is it on the city's comparative equity statement? So if you can have an answer for me on that, too, I'd appreciate it.
It's carried by, it was in the bond issuance, I think it was listed on my side of things.
I thought it was, too,
right.
but if so, if
that-
that is what DST refers to, then I'm wondering why it's showing up on our comparative equity statement unless it's somehow balanced out by RBT's contribution to the city, in which case that would be odd. So, anyway.
I
Good
think Joe's
question.
got good notes over there, and he's going to find out the
I think
answers
we've
to
given
those.
Joe 4 days' worth of work in the next 2, so. All right.
Any other questions then on debt service? Hearing none, City Hall operating,
Any pages I don't have?
40.
40. The rental income, internal, $300,000, external, $2,100, $302,100. As far as projected expenditures, have a contracted employee instead of a person doing our cleaning. So you go down to supplies and materials of $13,000, telephones for $48,000, water and sewer $3,000, heat $24,000, electricity $38,000, repairs other equipment $5,000, facility and maintenance $77,000. I know, why did it go up so much? Roof repairs, very much needed. There was an amount allocated for that. Contracted services $50,000, contingency $35,000, furniture and carpet $10,000, and machinery and equipment $30,000 for a total of $333,000.
2 questions for me real quick. Where is, you said we're outsourcing the janitorial services? Where is that being paid?
Under facility, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, so facility maintenance. So only a small share of the increase then is going towards the roof? The rest of it is replacing a much larger salary and benefits expense, so. Okay. And then the other question goes back to something we were asking about earlier. The projected expenses for City Hall are going down from 350 to 333, which is good. However, the rental seemed to go down more. It had been where we were trying to match up revenue to expenditures, and I think in prior years, if not 2018, those had been matched up exactly. But in this case, we have $302,000 being paid for by the departmental rentals, but expenditures at 333.
You got to look at that as a multi-year, it's Treasury Fund line item in terms of, so in 2018, when we established the rent, expenses came in less. So now you have a carryover, which you can use in 2019.
I see, okay. That answers my question then. Other questions on City Hall? Ms. Mealy?
Just one quick one. So the roof falls under contracted services or machinery and equipment?
Facility maintenance.
Oh, the roof is also under facility maintenance? Okay, plus the day-to-day maintenance, okay. Which means contracted services went up because, what is that for? I'm sorry.
I thought that was the,
That is for this building's, cable and internet costs, along with the elevator inspections, which have proven to be, a little more than they have in prior years, which is why we're looking at that with the project coming up. The fire suppression system, projects of that nature.
Okay. And is that also what would describe machinery and equipment, or?
Machinery and equipment, we're looking to solve some previous problems with computer licensing
Got
from
it.
previous projects that have been completed. So over the next 2 years, we're trying to spread that out to get everything up to date for the users of the server in this building.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, just to be clear, facility maintenance, $30K for the roof, $47 for maintenance for the building, correct? Or is there something else built into that line item?
30 for roof, 30 for maintenance, 4 to 5 for the mats and other things that they place at the doorways.
Okay, and then it's 77, so the other 10 to 12?
They're miscellaneous, just
Okay, just random stuff.
day-to-day
Got it,
or
okay.
year-to-year maintenance.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson, do I see your hand?
Yeah, so the contracted service, that's where we're paying a cleaning service to come in?
Facility maintenance,
Facility maintenance, okay.
76050.
All right, I thought the breakdown there was just different,
I'm sorry, say
wasn't
again?
it? Okay, I didn't follow that, so 37 is for, I know, you just said it.
77, 30 for maintenance,
Yeah.
30 for the roof, 4 to 5 for our mats
Okay.
around the building, and 10,000 for just regular maintenance.
So the 30 for the maintenance, that's your contracted cleaning
That's the firm that's
service?
contracted to come in to clean. Is that, did I?
Right, so then what did we pay 30,000 for this year if we had somebody?
You'll see with the salaries that cut off in the spring of this year, so there was cost along with the normal maintenance cost this year.
And we didn't do what I'd call maintenance as a result of spending the money on janitorial.
We did the normal maintenance that we have. I think that in the previous years, there were more costs related to the HVAC system, which we've been able to utilize RVT's new individual to help us with some of those service needs. So it's been a savings and a good way for us.
Our actual last year was 50, and our actual this year is 30, and we're hoping to get more out of that.
What previous year are you talking at 50?
2017?
2017?
Yeah.
That was the year, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, that we had a
The
ton of
HVAC.
HVAC issues.
Okay. Okay, I'm just wondering, how much is our contract then going to be for our cleaning service then? Do we know what that's going to be?
We're estimating it to be 30 at this point. I believe it is the expectation that it will go out for pricing, and we hope to come in under that, but 30, based upon current rates, is where we expect to be if nothing changes.
And that's a contract that'll come before council then.
It's over the threshold, so yes.
No, just from what I can see, it doesn't look like we're going to actually have the 30, how much for the roof? You know, I mean, I'm just not sure that we're going to have that because of other maintenance that seems to be consistent, you know, coming in around 30,000 every year, and that was without a contract with a cleaning service. I'm just thinking
There
through that.
was a cleaning service that had come in this year,
Right,
which is factoring into that $30,000 number.
yeah.
Along with our like I said, we are estimating our repair, or our facility maintenance from year to year to come in around $10,000 on average. So I think,
Okay,
for outside of the HVAC side of it. So I think that the puzzle all fits together.
Okay.
And
yeah, yeah. Maybe it just was confusing to me because of our special HVAC issue that we had. It
things have
just
been
looks,
changing over the years, correct?
it just looks
Nope,
crazy.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. All right, thank you.
Mr. Novielli?
Bill, can you tell me where the ADA ramp that we're proposing fits into this?
It doesn't fit into this part of the budget. It's, that, we're going to carry that through capital projects.
That's going to
Yeah,
be considered capital
yeah,
project?
how are you going to see that? Yeah.
Ms. Mealy?
No, I think we addressed, you asked my contract, whether the contract would come to council for, right? That's all.
Any other questions on City Hall budget? Seeing none. Unemployment compensation.
Page 39, you have a transfer from the general fund of 10,000 and the utility fund of 5,000 for revenue of 15,000, and unemployment claims paid proposed for 2019, hopefully will match for a total of 15,000.
Questions? Hearing none. Pool repairs capital fund?
That's just a budget page to recognize the money available for pool repairs, Memorial Park Pool. There's a transfer general fund of $2,000 and the available surplus $104,914 for a total of $106,914 with capital expenditures proposed at this point, 0.
Thank you. Just a comment that we were talking about this a few weeks ago, I think, in terms of needing to get to this kind of planning purposes for many more projects if we possibly can. It's a small number. I mean, $100,000 on a $25 million budget is not a huge number. But I'll note that we're $6,914 more than we started with 3 years ago. And that's despite somebody talking to me earlier this year about needing to spend $8,000 or $10,000, I think, replacing some pumps. Somehow, either we didn't replace the pumps or we paid for them some other way, so we've been able to maintain this dollar for at least now, so that next summer, if something needs to happen in the amount of $6,900, we've got it without even touching the original principal. And then a little bit more catastrophic money there if something bigger needs to happen. So, any other questions on pool? Hearing none. Let me then move on to announcements. I do need to announce, in case I don't remember to announce it, Wednesday, and this is mainly for my colleagues, there will be an executive session for the purpose of litigation, immediately following the next budget session. The second budget session then will be held Wednesday, November 28th at 7 p.m. here in council chambers. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be held on Thursday, December 8th at 7:30 p.m. in City Hall council chambers. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Anything anybody wants to say? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.